September 7th, 2025, a total lunar eclipse occurred, plunging the world into complete darkness. During this celestial event, an object originating from a star system far beyond our own inexplicably altered its colour, transitioning instantaneously from red to green. Almost immediately, a 9-fold increase in cyanide production was detected, alongside a surge of industrial nickel emissions, while iron became conspicuously absent. Both Harvard University and the Pentagon are closely monitoring the situation. In 20 days, this anomalous object is set to vanish behind the Sun, precisely at the point where its advanced technology might reveal its capabilities to disrupt our understanding of physics. The entity that reappears in December could be fundamentally different from the one that departs. This is because, at this very moment, as you're observing this, the object designated 3I Atlas is expelling approximately 150 kilograms of material every second. Astonishingly, its trajectory has remained entirely unchanged, a phenomenon mathematically impossible unless its mass is a staggering 33 billion tons, making it 1,000 times more substantial than any interstellar object previously encountered. Furthermore, and this detail has been largely overlooked, this object transmitted a radio signal from the exact same cosmic vicinity 48 years prior. This signal, known as the WOW signal, had a mere 0.6% probability of being a random occurrence. Subsequently, it appeared perfectly aligned with our planetary plane, a celestial alignment with only a 0.2% probability. Its passage past Mars, Venus and Jupiter carried a probability of only 0.005%. Such a series of improbable events cannot be attributed to mere chance. It is akin to winning the lottery multiple times over. On October 29th, the object will become undetectable, concealed from all Earth-based telescopes for 51 days. The data acquisition regarding this celestial event was unfortunately buried amidst the government shutdown of NASA, which commenced on October 1st, just 2 days before a crucial flyby of Mars that promised the clearest images yet. The high-resolution camera, capable of 30-kilometer resolution, captured something significant, though its nature remains unknown. Avi Loeb, an astrophysicist at Harvard, estimates a 30 to 40% likelihood that this object represents alien technology. While the scientific establishment has dismissed his claims, the empirical data appears to contradict their skepticism. The activation event observed during the eclipse was not a gradual warming process akin to a comet. Rather, it resembled a threshold being crossed, as if a switch had been deliberately activated. Currently, 3 observatories are actively monitoring the skies for unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP activity, driven by a theory that 3I Atlas might not be the primary concern but rather a sophisticated diversion. While global attention is fixated on the presumed mothership, the possibility exists that other craft are being deployed elsewhere. On December 19th, the object is predicted to return, achieving its closest approach to Earth. We are on the cusp of discovering whether the fundamental laws of physics as we understand them still hold true, or if an unknown intelligence has been orchestrating this grand experiment all along. If you find yourself as captivated by this unfolding mystery as I am, please consider liking this video and subscribing for future updates. I also invite you to share in the comments where you're watching from, the current time in your location, and your thoughts on whether 3I Atlas poses a potential danger to humanity. To support our growing community, please share this content on X, Facebook, Reddit, or via Messenger. Your consistent backing is greatly appreciated. Additionally, do explore our merchandise selection, conveniently linked below the video. We offer a delightful array of mugs and t-shirts that are sure to please. This presentation is structured into 2 parts. Initially, we will delve into 3I Atlas, dissecting the core message Avi Loeb is conveying. Subsequently, in the second segment, we will cover the most recent scientific developments. Feel free to utilize the provided timestamps to navigate directly to the sections that pique your interest most. Chapter 1: The Activation Event. The initial photographic evidence emerged during the early hours of September 8. Michael Jagger and Gerald Raymond, two passionate astrophotographers utilising the pristine dark skies of Namibia, had been diligently tracking 3I Atlas for several weeks. Their selection of that particular night was deliberate, coinciding with a total lunar eclipse unfolding overhead. This celestial alignment meant the moon's inherent glow, the constant diffusion of reflected sunlight that typically obscures fainter celestial bodies, would be absent. For a brief yet significant period, the nocturnal sky would attain an unprecedented level of darkness, darker than it had been in many months. They meticulously directed their sophisticated instruments towards the constellation Sagittarius, focusing on the specific region where 3I Atlas was anticipated to be. What their observations revealed, however, deviated dramatically from their expectations. The object had undergone a complete colour transformation. Every prior observation, every spectroscopic analysis conducted since the comet's initial discovery on July 1st had consistently indicated the same characteristic. 3I Atlas emanated a reddish hue, a colour commonly associated with objects coated in ancient radiation dust. The vacuum of space possesses a peculiar tendency to imbue celestial bodies with a reddish patina over extended periods. Cosmic rays, bombarding surfaces for millennia, systematically break down complex molecular structures into simpler, darker, and ultimately redder compounds. It is, in essence, the universe's form of rust. Yet the images captured on September 7th presented an entirely different spectacle, a brilliant, almost luminous green. This was not a gradual transition, nor a slow incremental shift as the object experienced warming. The colour change appeared instantaneous, a definitive threshold event, as if an unseen switch had been toggled the very moment the encompassing darkness descended. Consider this peculiar behaviour for a moment. Comets simply do not operate in this manner. As a comet approaches the Sun, its surface temperature escalates in a progressive, predictable fashion. Ice sublimes, volatile gases are released, and dust particles are lofted into space. This entire process is continuous and can be accurately modelled using relatively straightforward physical principles. The temperature rises, volatiles escape, and the object's brightness intensifies. This progression is typically represented by a smooth curve, not a sudden, abrupt step. 3I Atlas, however, defied this established pattern. The timing of this transformation raises questions that are exceedingly difficult to dismiss. Why did this remarkable metamorphosis occur specifically during the period of total darkness? If this were a consequence of simple solar heating, the colour alteration should have manifested gradually, progressing continuously and directly correlating with the object's diminishing distance from the Sun. Instead, it appeared to be synchronized with the eclipse itself, with the very absence of lunar illumination from the sky, as though the object had deliberately awaited the optimal viewing conditions for observers, or perhaps was anticipating a different, yet unknown, trigger. The observed green coloration itself provides a significant clue. When astronomers detect a green luminescence in comets, it typically signifies the presence of a specific molecule. Dicarbon, a molecular compound consisting of two carbon atoms chemically bonded, emits light at a distinct wavelength that our eyes perceive as green. This emission is a hallmark of organic chemistry, indicating that carbon-rich ices are being dissociated by solar radiation. Comets such as C2022 famously known as the Green Comet, that graced our solar system in 2023, exhibit their green glow due to the presence of dicarbon within their comas. However, spectroscopic analyses of 3I Atlas have, thus far, failed to detect any trace of dicarbon, or at least not any that would account for the observed coloration. The instruments directed at this object are specifically designed to detect that telltale emission line. If dicarbon were the responsible agent for the green hue, these instruments should readily register its presence, yet they do not. So, what is responsible for this striking green emission? Avi Lowe, the Harvard astrophysicist whose willingness to explore unconventional explanations has garnered him both renown and considerable controversy, has proposed an alternative: cyanide. On August 25, 2025, the Very Large Telescope situated in Chile's Atacama Desert detected an anomaly within the coma surrounding 3I Atlas. Cyanide, specifically in the form of the CN molecule, was being produced at a rate of approximately 20 grams per second. Individually, this production rate is not inherently unusual. Comets are known to generate cyanide. It is a component of the complex chemical reactions that transpire when organic-rich ices interact with solar radiation. What is truly extraordinary, however, is the subsequent development. As 3I Atlas drew nearer to the Sun, the production of cyanide did not merely increase, it experienced an explosive surge. The production rate escalated in inverse proportion to the heliocentric distance, raised to the 9th power, with a margin of error of 1. For those less accustomed to such mathematical relationships, this signifies an exceptionally steep and rapid increase. Most cometary outgassing phenomena follow much gentler power laws, typically ranging between 2 and 4. A power of 9 is far beyond the expected norm. This is the kind of exponential spike characteristic of a chemical reaction, reaching a critical threshold, rather than the gradual heating of ice. Furthermore, cyanide, unlike dicarbon, possesses the capability to produce a greenish luminescence under specific conditions, provided the concentration is sufficiently high and the excitation mechanism is appropriate. Under such circumstances, green light is emitted. While the precise wavelength may not perfectly match the dicarbon signature, to a camera capturing broad-spectrum light, the visual appearance would be remarkably similar. However, the narrative takes an even more perplexing turn. Cyanide was not the sole substance exhibiting a dramatic surge. Nickel emissions also escalated at the same precipitous rate, approximately 5 grams per second, increasing as the object approached the Sun. The presence of nickel within a comet's coma is not unprecedented. Numerous comets carry trace amounts of metals. When solar radiation heats the surface, these metals can be vaporized, emitting light at characteristic wavelengths as they absorb and re-emit solar energy. The critical issue, however, lies in what is conspicuously absent. Nickel and iron are elemental neighbours in the cosmic abundance table. They are formed concurrently within stellar cores, are ejected together during supernova events, and condense together in planetary systems. Wherever nickel is discovered in naturally occurring space objects, iron is invariably present as well. The precise ratio may vary, but both elements are consistently detected. This is a fundamental and reliable pattern in astrophysics, much like observing hydrogen in proximity to stars. 3I Atlas, however, is expelling nickel without any detectable trace of iron. The research team in Chile meticulously documented this observation in their paper, published in late August. They clearly measured nickel emissions, but, employing the same instruments and methodologies, found no evidence of iron. The observed ratio was so profoundly skewed that it defied conventional understanding of natural cometary composition. Lowe brought forth a detail that deeply unsettled the scientific community. There exists a specific environment where nickel is regularly found without concomitant iron: industrial manufacturing, particularly within the nickel carbonyl process. This is a metallurgical technique employed to produce exceptionally pure nickel. It involves heating nickel in the presence of carbon monoxide to form nickel tetracarbonyl, a volatile compound, which is subsequently decomposed to yield pure metallic nickel. This is the industrial method for generating nickel used in alloys, batteries, and specialized equipment. It is emphatically not how comets produce nickel. Lowe's suggestion, though carefully phrased as a question, was unambiguous. Could this anomaly serve as further corroboration for the possibility of 3I Atlas possessing a technological origin? Could we be witnessing industrial chemical processes occurring in the vastness of space? The immediate reaction from the majority of astronomers was outright rejection. The rigorous peer review process and the careful evaluation of existing evidence strongly favoured naturalistic explanations. Perhaps the iron is present but bound within dust grains that do not emit light in the same manner. Alternatively, the surface composition might be exceptionally unusual, enriched in nickel-bearing minerals due to some unique formation process. There is also the possibility of measurement error or misinterpretation. Nevertheless, the synchronized timing of the green activation, the threshold-like behavior, and the signature of industrial chemistry converge in a pattern that is difficult to entirely disregard. Each individual piece of evidence might be explainable in isolation. However, when considered collectively, they form a compelling and disquieting pattern. Adding another layer of intrigue to the activation event is the matter of its luminosity. Data released by the Atlas Telescope team, based on observations dating back to March 28, 2025, revealed an unexpected characteristic in 3I Atlas's behaviour. When the object was situated at a distance greater than 3.3 astronomical units from the Sun, a distance exceeding that between the Sun and the asteroid belt, its brightness increased in a specific, predictable manner. The cross-sectional area reflecting sunlight, a measure of the amount of solar radiation scattered by the object, grew in inverse proportion to its heliocentric distance, raised to the power of 3.9. However, a significant alteration occurred as the object drew closer to the Sun. The rate of brightness increase shifted, and the established relationship was abruptly broken. Instead of continuing its predictable brightening trend, the object's behaviour changed dramatically, as if a fundamentally different process had taken over. The researchers proposed a plausible physical mechanism. When 3I Atlas was distant from the Sun, it primarily scattered sunlight off its surface, which was covered in reddish dust. As it approached the Sun, it began to release minute, highly reflective icy particles, which subsequently augmented the reflectivity of the surrounding coma. This transition from one physical state to another would naturally induce a change in how the object's brightness scaled with distance. This explanation, while reasonable and consistent with known physics, implies that 3I Atlas underwent a distinct transition, a shift in its physical state occurring at a precise distance from the Sun, not as a gradual or smooth progression, but as a distinct mode change. The activation event observed during the eclipse could have been an integral part of this broader transition, or it might have been triggered by an entirely separate phenomenon. We are left with photographic evidence of a dramatic colour alteration, chemical signatures that diverge from established cometry models, and a luminosity profile that suggests the object is responding to solar heating in ways never before observed. September 7th marked the point at which facile explanations based on comparisons with other comets became untenable. Something about this object is fundamentally different. Whether this distinction is a product of natural processes or artificial intervention, whether it stems from an unusual chemical anomaly or provides evidence of advanced technology, remains an open and pressing question. Yet, the activation event undeniably occurred. The photographs are irrefutable, the spectroscopic data is scientifically validated, and within the astronomical community that has been intently observing this object, a pervasive sense of disquiet is steadily growing. Because if 3I Atlas is indeed merely a comet, it is a comet that demonstrably disregards the established rules of celestial behaviour, and if it is not a comet, if there exists even a remote possibility that it is something else entirely, then we are compelled to begin posing a significantly different set of questions regarding its impending disappearance behind the Sun in October. Questions such as, will the entity that re-emerges be the same one that departed? Chapter 2. The Decoy Hypothesis. A speculative theory is circulating within a select cadre of researchers, a notion that official channels are reluctant to publicly acknowledge. This concept originated with Omar El-Dadi, one of Avilo's close collaborators, and it presents an idea that initially sounds like pure science fiction until one begins to scrutinize the precise timing of events. The theory itself is elegantly simple. 3i Atlas is not the primary threat. Rather, it serves as deliberate diversion. Consider for a moment how one might devise a reconnaissance mission to a planetary system never before encountered. A direct and overt approach to the inhabited world would be strategically unsound. The objective would be to observe without being observed, to gather vital intelligence while remaining undetected. However, a significant challenge arises. Any civilization possessing the technological capacity to detect objects in space would eventually identify your probe. As telescopes advance and survey systems improve, detection becomes increasingly probable. So what is the solution? The strategy would involve dispatching something conspicuous, something substantial, brilliantly luminous, and undeniably impossible to ignore. This object would be designed to capture the undivided attention of every telescope, every observatory, and every planetary defense system. While all these resources are focused on the obvious object, while debates rage regarding its natural or artificial origin, while scientific papers are drafted and press conferences are convened, the true mission would proceed elsewhere, operating unnoticed and untracked. The decoy serves to draw the gaze, while the actual operation unfolds in the shadows. Eldaddy initially proposed this concept in a discussion with Lowe, framing it as a mere thought experiment. However, thought experiments have a curious tendency to evolve into robust hypotheses when the accumulating data begins to align with uncanny precision. And the data surrounding 3i Atlas does align, uncomfortably so. Examine the object's behavior. It is demonstrably massive, far exceeding expected dimensions for a celestial body of its apparent type. It is remarkably bright, easily observable by ground-based telescopes. Its trajectory is meticulously calculated to bring it in close proximity to multiple planets, thereby maximizing opportunities for observation. It exhibits a series of anomalies, peculiar chemical signatures and unusual brightness patterns, all of which serve to stimulate intense discussion, rigorous analysis, and focused scrutiny. It is, in essence, almost perfectly engineered to attract attention. Yet, to effectively distract an entire civilization's astronomical infrastructure, more than just an intriguing object is required. Strategic timing is paramount. The object must arrive at a juncture that guarantees maximum focus, maximum allocation of resources, and maximum intensity of debate. 3i Atlas was initially detected on July 1st, 2025. Within a mere 24 hours, its interstellar origin was confirmed. By July 3rd, major observatories worldwide had begun reorienting their instruments to track it. The Hubble Space Telescope captured its image on July 21st. The James Webb Space Telescope conducted observations on August 6th. The Sphere-X mission gathered data between August 8th and 12th. The Very Large Telescope in Chile performed spectroscopic analysis on August 25th. Consequently, every significant astronomical facility, every space telescope, and every planetary defense system equipped to monitor fast-moving objects is now fixated on 3i Atlas. Hundreds of millions of dollars in equipment, thousands of hours of dedicated observation time, and the concentrated intellectual effort of the global astronomical community are all directed at this single entity. This naturally leads to a critical question. What are we failing to observe? Lowe has taken Eldaddy's suggestion with sufficient seriousness to implement an active monitoring program. The Galileo project, which he founded and currently directs, operates 3 observatories, one located in Massachusetts, another in Pennsylvania, and a third in Nevada. Unlike conventional astronomical observatories primarily focused on distant celestial bodies, these facilities maintain a continuous surveillance of the entire sky. Their design is specifically geared towards detecting rapidly moving objects within Earth's atmosphere and near-Earth space, phenomena officially categorized as unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs, though more commonly known to the public as UFOs. The observatories within the Galileo project employ sophisticated arrays of sensors, including infrared cameras, optical cameras, radio detectors, audio sensors, and magnetometers. They meticulously record all incoming data, constructing a continuous visual record of the sky. When an anomalous event occurs, when an object exhibits movement patterns inconsistent with known aircraft, satellites, or meteors, the system automatically flags it for further investigation. The data is then subjected to thorough analysis, allowing for the identification of emergent patterns. Lowe has assigned his team a specific directive to monitor UAP activity during 3I Atlas's perihelion passage to seek potential correlations and to ascertain if any other anomalous phenomena manifest within Earth's atmosphere or near Earth space, while the astronomical community remains preoccupied with the interstellar visitor. The designated monitoring period is precise: October 31st, 2025, the date when 3I Atlas is projected to reach its closest point to the Sun. This is the anticipated time of maximum activity, energy expenditure, and potential for significant events. And it is also the period during which, if the decoy hypothesis holds true, any concurrent activities would proceed entirely undetected. The underlying logic behind this hypothesis delves into some rather unsettling implications. If an advanced civilization were to attempt the deployment of probes into our solar system, how would they execute such an operation? Launching probes directly from their home system and expecting them to survive the journey across interstellar distances spanning billions of years would be an impractical approach. Interstellar space is an inherently hostile environment, fraught with radiation, micrometeorite impacts, and the slow degradation of any mechanical system over vast timescales. Even the most robust probe would likely experience significant deterioration. A more feasible strategy would involve dispatching a mothership, a vessel sufficiently large to transport multiple smaller probes, equipped with the necessary power and propulsion systems to undertake the journey. Upon reaching the target system, a single flyby would be insufficient. The mothership would need to decelerate and enter a stable orbit around the host star. From this orbital vantage point, the probes could then be deployed, directed towards specific destinations such as Earth, Mars, Venus, the asteroid belt, or the moons of Jupiter, any location that might potentially harbour life, valuable resources, or phenomena of scientific interest. For a mothership approaching our solar system at 3I Atlas's velocity, approximately 60 kilometers per second relative to the Sun, a significant deceleration maneuver would be required. The most efficient location for such a maneuver is at perihelion, the point of closest approach to the Sun, utilising what is known as an O'Neill maneuver. This involves firing the engines at the precise moment of maximum velocity, while deep within the Sun's gravitational well. The principles of orbital mechanics dictate that this strategy yields the greatest change in velocity, known as delta V, for a given amount of fuel expenditure, making it the optimal approach for an interstellar spacecraft aiming to establish a bound orbit. 3I Atlas is scheduled to reach perihelion on October 29th, situated directly behind the Sun, rendering it invisible to all Earth-based telescopes. If a deceleration maneuver were to occur at this time, it would proceed entirely unobserved. Furthermore, if smaller probes were to be released during this concealed passage, directed towards the inner planets along meticulously calculated trajectories designed to minimize detection risk, these launches would also go unnoticed. The probes themselves would be small, dark, and their paths would be engineered for stealth. They would reach their intended destinations weeks or months later, long after 3I Atlas had continued its outward journey. By the time any alternative presence within the solar system was identified, it might be too late to implement any countermeasures. This is the juncture where the decoy hypothesis transitions from speculative conjecture to a matter of genuine concern, primarily due to a single figure that imbues this scenario with a degree of plausibility that is, frankly, alarming. 80 years. This is the estimated duration an object travelling at 3I Atlas's velocity would require to traverse the vast distance from a hypothetical base located at 1,000 astronomical units, 1,000 times the distance between the Earth and the Sun, to reach the inner solar system. 1,000 AU represents an immense distance, yet it is not an insurmountable one. This region falls within the outer expanse of the Oort cloud, the colossal spherical shell of icy bodies that encircles our solar system. An advanced civilization could potentially establish a hidden base within this remote domain, concealed amongst billions of comets and primordial frozen planetesimals, completely unbeknownst to us. Our most advanced observatories can detect substantial celestial bodies up to approximately 10 times the distance between Earth and the Sun, potentially 20 if fortunate, and the object is exceptionally luminous. Beyond this range, the vastness of space effectively becomes invisible to us. We are unable to perceive what might be concealed within the outer reaches of our solar system. Our current assumption is that it consists solely of comets, ice, and empty void. But this is an inference drawn from a deficit of information, not from exhaustive surveys. Should a clandestine base, perhaps a station, or a remote outpost established by a civilization proficient in interstellar navigation, exist out there, they could have been observing us for centuries, monitoring our progression. They might have waited until we reached a specific technological pinnacle before dispatching something towards us. 3 astronomical objects designated ATLS could have been dispatched 80 years ago, in the year 1945, coinciding precisely with humanity's initial success in manipulating the atom. Around the very same epoch we developed the capacity for planetary-scale self-destruction. This is the precise sort of developmental milestone that might provoke a response from such observers, assuming they are indeed present. All of this could easily be dismissed as unfounded anxiety and the misinterpretation of coincidental occurrences, perceiving order where only randomness reigns. Nevertheless, the instruments deployed by the Galileo project are diligently recording, and the ongoing celestial surveillance persists. If an increase in unidentified aerial phenomena activity is noted during the latter part of October, if objects begin to materialize within Earth's atmosphere that defy conventional explanations, the collected data will bear witness to it. These sensors are indifferent to pre-existing theories or personal biases. They simply document reality as it unfolds. This impartiality is precisely what renders the decoy hypothesis partially verifiable. If the 3 ATLS are merely a comet, then the level of UAP activity should remain within its typical expected range, a collection of random events, misidentifications, and the usual background noise inherent in any data set. However, if something more is transpiring, if the notion of a diversionary tactic holds any credence, then the statistical patterns ought to shift, revealing a greater number of anomalies, a tighter temporal clustering, and discernible patterns correlating with the closest approach of the 3I ATLS to the Sun. We will not have to wait long for definitive answers. The monitoring is active at this very moment, and data is accumulating nightly. By the time 3 ATLS re-emerges from behind the Sun in December, we will possess knowledge regarding any alterations in our skies during the period when our attention was captivated by the conspicuous object visible to all. The disquieting reality is that we are ill-equipped to detect sophisticated deception. If an advanced intelligence intended to observe us discreetly, while our focus is diverted by an overt target, we lack the necessary observational coverage and analytical capacity to uncover their presence. We are presently struggling to adequately track near-Earth asteroids that pose potential impact risks. The detection of clandestine probes operating within Earth's orbit would necessitate an infrastructural framework that we have yet to construct. This brings forth a query that keeps certain researchers awake at night. If the decoy hypothesis proves accurate, and a colossal mothership positioned behind the Sun is preparing to disseminate reconnaissance drones throughout the inner solar system, what precisely are we expected to do? At present, the answer is to do nothing. We observe. We document. We hold out hope that whatever emerges next will either be harmless or entirely non-existent, as we are demonstrably unprepared for any other eventuality. Chapter 3: The Shutdown that was not random. October 1st, 2025. The United States government experienced a shutdown. Over 15,000 employees of NASA were placed on furlough, facilities were shuttered, data transmission halted, and communication channels became inoperative. 2 days later, 3I Atlas achieved its closest proximity to Mars. The timing of these events warrants careful consideration. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, operated by NASA, is equipped with a sophisticated camera known as HiRISE, the High-Resolution Imaging Science Experiment. Its primary function is to capture images of the Martian surface with exceptional detail, discerning features as minute as 30 centimeters in diameter from orbit. However, cameras are not restricted in their orientation. If the HiRISE instrument were directed towards deep space, in the direction of a rapidly moving object passing near Mars, its resolution would translate differently. At 30 kilometers per pixel, this level of detail could potentially resolve the nucleus of 3 Atlas, allowing us to determine if it is a singular solid mass or a more complex structure, and to identify any discernible structural elements should they exist. HiRISE captured images on October 2nd and 3rd. The operators of the camera were aware of the scheduled observations, having meticulously planned them weeks in advance. The data was successfully acquired, stored, and prepared for subsequent processing and public release. However, the government shutdown commenced, effectively locking the collected data within NASA's servers. Stephen Miller, the Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy at the White House, provided an interview on October 3rd. During this broadcast, which was aired on national television, he was posed a direct question: "Has the President been briefed on 3 Atlas?" This inquiry was not arbitrary. It originated from a journalist actively following the narrative, who was aware of Lowe's published research and understood that an interstellar object exhibiting anomalous characteristics might warrant the attention of the executive branch, potentially triggering classified briefings, contingency planning, and interagency coordination. Miller's response was notably guarded and non-committal. He acknowledged awareness of the object's existence, but refrained from confirming or denying any presidential briefings, a standard protocol when classified information is involved. However, the mere fact that the question was posed, that it successfully navigated editorial review to reach a national television audience, suggests that some individual within the communication hierarchy deemed it worthy of pursuit. The timing of these events becomes particularly striking when examining the sequence. The government shutdown commenced on October 1st. The close pass by Mars occurred on October 3rd, and on October 4th, a mere 24 hours after this orbital rendezvous, certain mainstream media outlets received preliminary briefings from NASA sources characterizing 3 Atlas as a conventional comet. These communications lacked technical reports, imagery, or spectroscopic data, consisting instead of verbal assurances that all was proceeding normally, implying there was nothing significant to report. NASA's official stance maintains that the processing of high-resolution data requires substantial time for calibration and analysis before public dissemination. This is presented as a standard procedure, designed to prevent misinterpretation, erroneous conclusions, and unwarranted public alarms stemming from premature release of unverified information. While these points are valid, the act of rapidly providing verbal characterizations to the media prior to the completion of the analysis appears inconsistent with NASA's typical meticulous approach. If the data necessitates days or even weeks of processing for accurate interpretation, why engage in media briefings mere 24 hours after data acquisition? Why not await the conclusion of the full analysis? Lowe's response to inquiries regarding the shutdown was notably direct. When questioned whether the delay in data release might suggest a conspiracy to conceal evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence, his reply became a memorable soundbite. "The delay is not the signature of extraterrestrial intelligence. It's more a signature of terrestrial stupidity." This statement effectively reframes the situation as one of bureaucratic incompetence rather than deliberate concealment, a more parsimonious explanation aligning with Occam's razor. However, timing possesses an obstinate quality. It disregards simplicity and elegance, remaining an unignorable element within the data. The European Space Agency, unaffected by the government shutdown, also captured images of 3 Atlas on October 3rd using their Mars orbiters, the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter and Mars Express. These images were released by ESA on October 7th, a 4-day processing period deemed reasonable for an unexpected target, using instruments primarily designed for surface imaging. The resulting images depict a faint, hazy white dot against the blackness of space, offering limited detail as the cameras were not optimized for observing distant objects. Nevertheless, ESA chose to release the available data, described as raw, preliminary, and uncalibrated, inviting interpretation from the public. NASA's approach differed significantly. Following the shutdown, there was a period of silence punctuated by verbal briefings to select media outlets that characterized the object without presenting the supporting data. This was followed by continued silence concerning the high-resolution observations, which should have provided significantly superior clarity compared to ESA's captured images. The Chinese Space Agency operates Tianwen-1, another Mars orbiter with imaging capabilities, and the United Arab Emirates operates the Hope orbiter. Both were strategically positioned to observe 3 Atlas. Neither agency has publicly released any data. Whether they successfully captured pertinent images, whether they are currently analyzing their findings, or whether they are sharing this analysis with other space agencies remains unknown. Radio silence can be a deliberate choice, a consequence of protocol, or simply the sound of individuals grappling to comprehend their observations before disclosing them. A discernible pattern emerges in the manner governments handle information that deviates from established frameworks. Initial confusion, followed by classification, and then the carefully managed dissemination of sanitized details intended to influence public perception. This is not necessarily driven by malice, but rather by an institutional impulse to preserve stability and prevent chaos. If 3-2 Atlas is indeed merely a comet, and the data reveals nothing extraordinary, then the delay in its release is inconsequential. Processing requires time, shutdowns cause disruptions, and all information will eventually be made public and understandable. However, if the data reveals something that defies easy explanation, if the high-resolution images captured by HiRISE pose more questions than they answer, then the silence transforms into a strategic maneuver. Releasing perplexing information during a government shutdown, when interagency coordination and public messaging are compromised, and the scientific community cannot be adequately prepared for potentially startling revelations, becomes untenable. In such a scenario, the preferred course of action is to wait, to meticulously analyze, to forge a consensus, and then to release the information in a controlled manner designed to minimize disruption. Alternatively, the data might never be released at all, allowing the assumption that it was unremarkable to prevail. Amateur astronomers attempted to bridge this information gap. A YouTuber, operating under the moniker Dobsonian Power, shared images captured on October 3rd, claiming to reveal unusual structural characteristics within 3 Atlas. These images rapidly circulated across social media platforms, garnering thousands of shares and hundreds of comments, prompting speculation. Is this evidence of artificial construction? Is this the proof we have been anticipating? However, analyses conducted by other astronomers tempered this excitement. The images in question were captured using solar observation equipment, not instruments designed for deep space imaging. Extensive digital enhancement had amplified noise, creating the illusion of discernible structures. Atmospheric turbulence, optical aberrations, and processing artifacts all contributed to patterns that appeared significant but were ultimately spurious. This serves as a potent reminder of our profound desire for clarity and definitive answers. In the absence of official data, we are inclined to accept amateur observations and wishful thinking, anything that can fill the void. This void exists because the entities possessing the most advanced instruments, those holding the critical data we seek, are not making it available. Whether this lack of transparency stems from incompetence or deliberate intent, the outcome remains the same: uncertainty, rampant speculation, and escalating unease. What exactly did the HiRISE instrument capture? The camera possesses the resolution necessary to potentially address fundamental questions about 3I Atlas. Is it a singular, solid nucleus, or a loosely aggregated collection of material? Does it exhibit surface features consistent with natural geological processes, or something else entirely? Are there any discernible geometric formations? Are there any indications of components that deviate from the conventional rubble pile model? These images are presently stored within NASA's data repositories. The raw files are intact, having recorded the photons emanating from 3 Atlas. Information was captured, and the answers to at least some of our pressing questions reside within a database, awaiting processing and subsequent release. Days, then weeks, elapse. The government shutdown concludes, and operations gradually resume. Yet the high-resolution images of 3 Atlas still do not appear in the public archive. One can access the database maintained by the HiRISE team, which inventories all recorded observations. Searches can be conducted by date, target, or coordinates. The observations from October 2nd and 3rd should be listed. However, they are either absent, inadequately indexed for easy retrieval, or undergoing an extended processing period for reasons yet to be elucidated. This period of radio silence originates from the highest resolution camera that had an unobstructed view of perhaps the most compelling interstellar object to visit our solar system in years. It is possible that this silence signifies nothing extraordinary, that the bureaucratic machinery is simply functioning at a glacial pace, and that we will eventually see images confirming our expectations. A slightly irregular cometary nucleus surrounded by a dusty coma, devoid of anything unusual. The matter would then be closed. Alternatively, the silence itself could serve as a signal, not necessarily indicative of a conspiracy, but rather of profound confusion. It suggests that individuals are struggling to comprehend what they are observing before presenting it to the world, that scientists are engaged in vigorous debate over interpretation, and that administrators are carefully weighing the risks associated with releasing data that could be widely misinterpreted. The government shutdown provided a convenient justification for the delay, allowing blame to be deflected onto politicians and the budget crisis, rather than on the astronomers attempting to perform their professional duties. However, this shutdown did not prevent the European Space Agency from releasing their images, nor did it dissuade amateur astronomers from sharing their own observations. It only impeded NASA, the agency possessing the most crucial data, from disseminating its findings. The absence of this data speaks with a far greater resonance than any official pronouncement ever could. Chapter 4: The Scientific Civil War. Jason Wright occupies his office at Penn State University, a tenured astronomer whose credentials are not easily challenged. He maintains a blog titled Astro-Rorite, where he discusses his research, offers commentary on academic papers, and engages with the broader astronomical community. In late July of 2025, he published a post titled Avian 3I Atlas. The content of this post was far from complimentary. Wright meticulously dissected Lowe's analysis, addressing each point and systematically dismantling arguments concerning image degradation, coma detection, and spectroscopic data. He highlighted what he perceived as fundamental misunderstandings of astronomical observational methodologies. The prevailing tone was one of exasperation, a palpable frustration arising from observing an individual with a considerable public platform making claims that demonstrably fail under scrutiny. One particular section of the post proved especially noteworthy. Wright quoted directly from Lowe's preprint paper, "The assertion that the observed fuzziness surrounding 3I Atlas is inconclusive due to the object's motion and the inevitable image smearing during exposure." Wright then proceeded to explain precisely why this claim was erroneous. Comet astronomers, he elucidated, do not track stars when observing comets. Instead, they track the comet itself. The telescope follows the celestial body across the sky, maintaining it centered within the field of view. Consequently, stars appear as streaks, while the comet remains in sharp focus. This is a fundamental technique, a basic principle that any planetary scientist would acquire during their graduate studies. Lowe had dismissed observations of 3 Atlas's coma by attributing them to tracking errors. However, the observers in question were not making errors. They were executing their professional duties correctly, and the observed coma was a genuine phenomenon. Wright's conclusion was stark. This is sloppy work beneath the level of an undergraduate. He further solidified his assessment by assigning a grade, as the blog post included a formal grading rubric, as if Lowe had submitted a piece of homework. The final mark awarded was a failing grade. This is not the conventional manner in which scientific disagreements are typically conducted. Researchers usually respond by publishing counterarguments, presenting alternative evidence at conferences, and engaging through formal academic channels, maintaining professional courtesy even when they hold a colleague in severe professional error. Publicly grading another scientist's work as if they were a student who had failed to prepare for an examination is highly unconventional. This approach is typically adopted only when professional courtesy is deemed secondary to the imperative of preventing the dissemination of misinformation. It signifies a belief that the standard channels of peer review and academic discourse are being circumvented by blog posts and media interviews, and that a direct and unequivocal statement is necessary to expose the perceived lack of substance. Wright was not an isolated voice. Other astronomers, individuals specializing in the study of comets, asteroids, and interstellar objects, expressed similar sentiments of frustration. Most conveyed these feelings privately. Some voiced their concerns in seminars and departmental meetings. A select few were willing to be quoted by journalists, albeit typically with cautious qualifications. They would remark, "It's unusual. It doesn't align with our standard models, but it's likely a natural phenomenon. We require more data." The word likely carries significant weight in these pronouncements. What remained conspicuously absent from most public statements and was only expressed in private conversations over coffee or late into the night at conferences was the acknowledgement that engaging with Lowe's theories inadvertently lends them credibility. The more one debates, the greater the attention these ideas receive, and the controversy itself becomes the narrative. Media outlets, in particular, are drawn to conflict. The scenario of a Harvard professor postulating an alien mothership versus establishment scientists asserting it's merely a comet generates headlines that drive significant traffic. Consequently, the majority of astronomers opted for silence. This was not an indication of agreement, nor an inability to refute the claims, but rather a strategic decision rooted in the understanding that their reputation amplifies the original message. It presented a dilemma: engage and inadvertently broaden the audience for the idea, or ignore it and allow it to spread independently, while at least avoiding active participation. This dynamic created a vacuum. The public hears an articulate, credentialed voice, presenting extraordinary claims. They might hear a few rebuttals, often technical and difficult to comprehend, and they observe a considerable amount of silence from individuals who possess relevant expertise but choose not to share their opinions. Into this void flood speculation and conspiracy theories, fueling the assumption that silence equates to suppression. Steve Desch, an astrophysicist at Arizona State University, chose to break this silence in a distinct manner. Rather than publishing a blog post, he critiqued the paper on social media, presenting his calculations to highlight its inaccuracies. His message conveyed a pointed critique. "Sorry it took me so long to grade your August 20th assignment, Lowe. Are you sure you're ready for a class on comets? You might need to learn about things like bow-shocks and chemistry." The mockery was direct and unvarnished. Desch has dedicated his career to studying the formation of planetary systems, the behaviour of celestial objects, and the interpretation of collected data. When an influential figure like Lowe makes assertions that contradict fundamental physics and require the disregard of well-established scientific processes, the resulting frustration becomes deeply personal. This is because the issue transcends mere incorrectness. Everyone makes mistakes. Science often advances through the correction of errors, the testing and eventual discarding of hypotheses. The core problem arises when an influential individual repeatedly commits similar errors, refuses to engage with technical refutations, and continues to champion ideas that the broader scientific community considers profoundly flawed. Tom Statler, serving as the lead scientist for small bodies in the solar system at NASA, holds a position responsible for coordinating observations, understanding telescopic data, and translating complex scientific information into coherent explanations. When journalists inquired about 3.2 Atlas, his response was measured yet unequivocal. It appears to be a comet. It exhibits cometary behavior. In virtually every respect, it strongly resembles the comets we are familiar with. Statler acknowledged that 3 Atlas possesses unusual characteristics, noting its peculiar chemistry and interesting trajectory, and affirming that it warrants careful study. However, he emphasized that unusual does not equate to artificial. He posited that nature itself is inherently creative, and the universe frequently produces objects that defy expectations and do not fit neatly into pre-existing classifications. This, he argued, is the very mechanism through which learning occurs and scientific progress is achieved. Statler's fundamental argument was that while the object is indeed strange, such strangeness is not uncommon in natural phenomena, and there is no compelling reason to invoke technological intervention when natural processes can adequately explain the observed phenomena. The overwhelming consensus within the scientific community aligns with Statler's perspective. When astronomers are surveyed and asked for their assessment of 3 Atlas, the prevailing opinion is that it is a comet exhibiting some atypical features, likely attributable to quirks in its formation or composition. There is nothing within these characteristics that necessitates the invocation of extraterrestrial intelligence, nor anything that cannot be explained by our current understanding of physics. However, consensus does not equate to absolute certainty. Furthermore, there is a distinction between explaining a phenomenon in principle and elucidating it in exhaustive detail. In principle, a comet could manifest a forward-facing jet, and in principle, it could exhibit exceptionally high nickel emissions without detectable iron. Fundamentally, it's conceivable that a carbon dioxide to water ratio 8 times greater than any comet previously observed could exist. In theory, every peculiar observation should possess a straightforward terrestrial explanation. The crux of the matter lies in whether stringing together numerous such theoretical possibilities strains credulity to its breaking point. At what juncture does a theoretically achievable scenario transition into an improbably remote outcome? Lowe's response to his detractors has remained remarkably consistent. He welcomes the accumulation of data and is prepared to revise his conclusions when compelling evidence dictates. He has even devised a classification system, dubbed the Lowe scale, where a designation of 0 signifies a definitively natural origin, and 10 indicates an unequivocally artificial one. He has assigned 3 interstellar objects to various points on this scale as new information surfaces. Currently, he estimates a 30 to 40% likelihood of a non-natural genesis for the observed phenomena. This numerical assessment incenses his critics, who argue it lacks the rigour of a formal Bayesian analysis or a precise probabilistic model. They contend it's merely an educated guess cloaked in quantitative language, and that intuition, however seasoned, cannot substitute for empirical scientific proof. Lowe, however, counters that his critics are perpetuating the same logical fallacy in reverse. They are assigning a vanishingly small probability to the technological hypothesis without adequate substantiation, defaulting to natural explanations simply because it aligns with established norms and past discoveries. The invocation of intelligence, in their view, represents an abdication of scientific inquiry. He cites historical precedent. Upon the discovery of pulsars, their remarkably consistent signals led astronomers to half-jokingly label them LGM-1 and LGM-2, short for little green men. The possibility of an artificial source was briefly considered but ultimately dismissed when natural explanations, such as the precise rotation of neutron stars or sweeping lighthouse beams across the cosmos, emerged. These signals, it was concluded, could be produced by nature without any need for intelligent design. But what if nature were incapable of generating such signals? What if no known physical process could account for the observed phenomena? At what point would the scientific community genuinely entertain the notion of detected technology? And what quantum of evidence would be requisite to elevate this possibility to the forefront of investigation? These are questions without definitive answers. Science lacks a pre-established protocol for such unprecedented circumstances. We have never encountered physical evidence of an extraterrestrial civilization, nor do we have a clear understanding of what such evidence might entail. The challenge lies in balancing anomalous observations against the overwhelming weight of prior probabilities. Thus the debate ensues. Lowe advocates for maintaining an open mind, arguing that precluding possibilities without thorough investigation is inherently unscientific. The scientific establishment, conversely, maintains that extraordinary claims necessitate extraordinary proof, and the evidence thus far, while intriguing, falls far short of being extraordinary. This internal schism plays out across academic papers, online forums, and scientific conferences. It influences funding decisions, the approval of research proposals, and the allocation of telescope observation time. It shapes media narratives, public perception, and ultimately the level of trust individuals place in scientists to accurately convey unfolding events within our solar system. Through all of this, the object Oumuamua, and subsequently Borisov, continued its silent transit, unperturbed by human discourse, adhering to its predetermined path. Regardless of human interpretation, the celestial body remains indifferent to whether it is classified as a comet or a probe. It will simply continue its journey. Ultimately, empirical data, not opinion pieces or televised debates, will resolve the controversy. Precise observations, meticulous measurements, and the unvarnished facts of Oumuamua's passage through perihelion, its emergence from solar glare, and its subsequent trajectory beyond Jupiter and out of our solar system, will provide the definitive answers. Until then, the scientific schism persists, with the true casualties being not shattered careers, but eroded public trust and a growing suspicion that scientific experts may not possess the definitive knowledge they claim. Perhaps they are too quick to dismiss ideas that challenge their established paradigms. Perhaps the establishment prioritizes maintaining consensus over the pursuit of truth. This erosion of confidence is significant because if Oumuamua is indeed something extraordinary, if undeniable evidence emerges that defies explanation, we will require public faith in scientific institutions to help us comprehend its implications. Currently, that faith is fracturing along the very fault lines of this ongoing debate. Chapter 5. The Mathematics of Impossibility. 4,000 observations, 227 observatories, 5 months of meticulous tracking. Avi Loeb and his team have meticulously compiled every recorded measurement of Oumuamua's position as it traversed the night sky. The data originated from a diverse array of sources: professional astronomical observatories, dedicated amateur astronomers, and automated sky survey systems. Any entity that had focused a telescope on the object and meticulously logged its coordinates. All this information was fed into sophisticated orbital calculation software, the kind capable of determining trajectories with astonishing accuracy, provided a sufficient number of data points are available. The findings were unambiguous. The object was following a trajectory governed solely by gravitational forces. There were no discernible deviations, no unexplained accelerations, merely the elegant mathematical unfolding of an object navigating the sun's gravitational field precisely as predicted by Newtonian physics. This should have definitively settled the matter. A natural origin, case closed. However, a single, persistent anomaly remained. The object was shedding mass. An image captured by the Hubble Space Telescope on July 21st clearly depicted this phenomenon. A plume of material extending from Oumuamua towards the Sun, approximately 10 times longer than it was wide. This expulsion of matter from the sunward side, driven by a combination of sublimation and solar pressure, carried an inherent implication. When mass is ejected in a specific direction, the fundamental laws of physics dictate acceleration in the opposite direction, a direct consequence of momentum conservation. Imagine throwing something forward. You inherently move backward. Comets engage in this behavior routinely. As their ice sublimes and gas jets away, the comet experiences a minute impulse, a non-gravitational acceleration that subtly alters its orbital path. Astronomers can precisely measure these accelerations. While small, they are real and detectable when a substantial volume of observations is accumulated. The object's path visibly deviates from a purely gravitational trajectory. The mathematical models clearly illustrate this deviation. Yet, Oumuamua exhibits no such deviation, a zero measurable non-gravitational acceleration, despite incontrovertible evidence of mass loss. Loeb performed the calculations. If the object is losing 150 kilograms per second, a figure consistent with Hubble's observations, and if this mass is being expelled in a directed jet towards the Sun, then momentum conservation demands that the object accelerate away from the Sun. This acceleration should be detectable within the orbital data, manifesting as a minor yet measurable alteration in its trajectory. This, however, is not observed. The only conceivable reconciliation of these contradictory facts is that the object possesses a significantly greater mass than initially anticipated. If its weight is substantial enough that 150 kilograms per second becomes negligible, akin to throwing pebbles off an aircraft carrier, where the ship's speed remains practically unaffected due to the vast mass disparity, then the data aligns. How massive would Oumuamua need to be for its mass loss to be undetectable? Loeb calculated the minimum requirement, 33 billion tons. Assuming a density comparable to solid rock, approximately 2.5 grams per cubic centimetre, this mass translates to a diameter of about 5 kilometres, roughly the width of Manhattan Island. This is not the nucleus of a comet. It is the size of a small asteroid. However, asteroids do not produce jets. They do not expel material towards the Sun. They are solid bodies, not icy compositions. The very reason we classify Oumuamua as a comet is its performance of actions exclusively characteristic of comets. Thus, we are presented with an object behaving like a comet, yet requiring the mass of an asteroid to explain the absence of orbital trajectory changes. Mathematics, however, remains impartial to our classifications. It solely demands internal consistency. And at present, these disparate pieces fail to coalesce seamlessly. The Gaia Space Observatory further complicated the emerging picture. Between August 8th and 12th, it captured infrared observations of Oumuamua. Based on its luminosity at a wavelength of 1 micrometer, and assuming a reasonable albedo, the research team estimated a diameter of 46 kilometers. This is 10 times larger than the minimum mass estimate. If Gaia's findings are accurate, Oumuamua is not merely Manhattan-sized. It surpasses many asteroids found in the main asteroid belt. A diameter of 46 kilometers implies a mass of approximately 1 trillion tons, 1 million times more massive than Borisov, the previous interstellar comet. This presents a formidable statistical challenge. Interstellar space, while not entirely devoid of matter, is far from crowded. Our understanding of stellar systems, planetary formation, and the rate at which objects are ejected into interstellar space allows us to estimate the density of matter per unit volume. This includes rocky bodies, icy objects, and a spectrum of sizes. The figures indicate that detecting a 46-kilometre interstellar object within a decade of observational surveys is extraordinarily improbable. We should have encountered hundreds or thousands of smaller objects first. Comets of Borisov's size should be commonplace, while Manhattan-sized objects should be rare occurrences. Objects 50 times larger should be virtually non-existent within the sample we would expect to collect over 10 years. Yet, here it is, the third confirmed interstellar object, and it is colossal. Loeb highlighted this in his inaugural paper on Oumuamua, referring to it as the reservoir argument. To introduce a 46-kilometre rocky body into the inner solar system within a decade necessitates a specific density of such objects in interstellar space. Calculating this density reveals that it exceeds what stellar systems can plausibly produce by roughly 4 orders of magnitude, 10,000 times the expected amount of material. This implies either an extraordinary stroke of luck in encountering such a rare giant on only our third attempt, a fundamental flaw in our underlying assumptions, or that the object does not represent a random sample from the general interstellar population. Statistics cannot definitively prove artificiality, but they can certainly flag when something is highly unusual. If you flip a coin and it lands heads 3 times in a row, you don't immediately suspect the coin is rigged. However, if you flip it 100 times and it consistently lands heads, you begin to scrutinize that coin very closely. Oumuamua is the statistical equivalent of a suspicious coin. Each new measurement adds another layer of improbability. Its trajectory aligns with the ecliptic plane, a rare occurrence. The timing of its passage near multiple planets is extraordinarily rare. Its mass significantly exceeding expectations is implausible. The detection of chemical signatures indicative of industrial processes is unusual. Its activation during solar eclipse remains unexplained. Individually, any one of these factors could be attributed to chance. Collectively, however, they form a pattern that causes statisticians significant unease. And there is one more number in this accumulating pile, perhaps the most unsettling of all, its potential connection to the WOW signal. On August 15th, 1977, the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University detected a powerful narrow-band signal at a frequency of 1420.456 MHz. The transmission lasted 72 seconds, registering 30 times stronger than the ambient background noise. Crucially, it occurred precisely on the hydrogen line frequency, which SETI researchers consider a universal communication channel. Astronomer Jerry Eman famously inscribed WOW on the printout, noting that the signal never repeated. The celestial coordinates were recorded: right ascension, 19 hours 25 minutes, declination, 27 degrees. The signal originated from the direction of Sagittarius, towards the galactic centre, a region densely populated with stars. Loeb meticulously calculated Oumuamua's position on August 15th, 1977, not its current location, but where it would have been 48 years prior, tracing its trajectory backward in time. At that point, the object would have been approximately 600 astronomical units from Earth, still on its approach, travelling at its characteristic speed of 60 kilometers per second. The recorded direction of the WOW signal was right ascension, 19 hours 40 minutes, declination 19 degrees. The angular separation between these two directions is 9 degrees. In a sky covering 41,000 square degrees, two randomly selected directions have approximately a 0.6% chance of aligning within 9 degrees of each other. This could be mere coincidence. The galaxy is teeming with stars in that sector, and the WOW signal could have emanated from any one of them, or indeed from none of them, if it was a terrestrial interference that somehow circumvented all filters designed to eliminate false positives. However, if Oumuamua transmitted that signal 48 years ago, perhaps as a test of Earth's detection capabilities, a declaration of its presence, or a scan for radioactivity, what kind of transmitter would have been required? Loeb delved into the numerical implications. At a distance of 600 astronomical units, generating a signal strong enough to be registered by the Big Ear telescope's sensitivity would necessitate between half a gigawatt and 2 gigawatts of power. This is comparable to the output of a large nuclear reactor. It falls within the range of power generation capabilities we can envision for an advanced spacecraft. It is not impossible, nor does it require physics beyond our current understanding, but rather engineering on a scale exceeding anything humans have yet achieved in space exploration. Furthermore, if the signal was transmitted 48 years ago from an object that coincidentally passes through our inner solar system only now, this implies deliberate timing and planning, a trajectory calculated to arrive decades after the initial signal. This would grant the target civilization ample time to develop detection capabilities, to become aware they are being observed. Alternatively, it suggests we possess a remarkable talent for discerning patterns in random noise, that a 9-degree alignment is coincidental yet tantalizingly close, not definitive enough to be convincing, and that the entire scenario is a confluence of coincidences layered upon wishful thinking. Mathematics can quantify probabilities. It can indicate the likelihood of an event under various assumptions. What it cannot do is definitively ascertain which assumptions are correct. The numbers demonstrate that Oumuamua exhibits unusual characteristics across multiple independent metrics. Whether this unusualness points to technology, or merely exceptionally rare natural circumstances, remains beyond the scope of mathematics alone to resolve. However, the numerical evidence continues to accumulate. A minimum mass of 33 billion tons, a potential diameter of 46 kilometers, a 0.6% probability for signal alignment, 0.2% for ecliptic trajectory, 0.005% for planetary timing. When small probabilities are multiplied together, the resulting probabilities become exceedingly small. At a certain threshold, extremely small probabilities begin to arouse suspicion. At that juncture, coincidences demand a rational explanation. We have not yet reached that point. The scientific community has not yet achieved a consensus that something truly anomalous is occurring. However, we are closer than most people realize. A few more unexplained data points, a few more measurements that defy existing models, and the mathematics of impossibility will begin to resemble a signal rather than mere coincidence. The pertinent question is what happens when we cross that threshold, when the numbers can no longer accommodate comfortable explanations, when the improbabilities accumulate beyond what chance can reasonably account for. Do we place our faith in mathematics, or do we rely on our ingrained intuition that the universe operates differently, that extraterrestrials do not visit solar systems, that extraordinary claims necessitate extraordinary proof even when conventional explanations begin to falter? The data is indifferent to our comfort. It continues to arrive, measurement after measurement, building a case that something about Oumuamua defies the narrative we wish to believe. Chapter 6. What Occurs in Darkness, October 29th, 2025. Oumuamua reaches perihelion, its closest approach to the Sun, at 1.36 astronomical units, approximately 203 million kilometers, just inside the orbit of Mars. From Earth's vantage point, the object effectively vanishes. This is not due to its cessation of existence, but rather because the Sun obstructs our view. When observing outward into space from Earth, the Sun occupies a region of the sky that is impossible to observe due to its overwhelming brightness. Directing a telescope towards the Sun would result in blinded sensors, damaged instruments, and a complete absence of usable data. There exists a zone of avoidance encircling our star, a blind spot extending several degrees in all directions. Oumuamua will be enveloped within this blind spot from late October through late November, resulting in 51 days of observational darkness. 51 days during which no telescope on Earth can ascertain what is occurring. The timing of this obscuration is almost poetic. The most critical juncture of the object's passage, the point at which it exhibits its greatest activity, energy, and potential for unexpected behavior, occurs behind an impenetrable veil of light. If one were designing a trajectory to minimize observation during a critical maneuver, the optimal strategy would be to position perihelion on the far side of the Sun relative to Earth. The orbit would be arranged such that when the object is closest to the star, moving at its highest velocity and possessing maximum access to gravitational energy for an orbital adjustment maneuver, it would be invisible to the target planet. Oumuamua achieves this, whether by accident or design. The distinction is only relevant if one subscribes to the notion of intentionality. An orbital maneuver is an elegant application of physics. When deeply entrenched within a gravitational well and moving at high speed, an object possesses immense kinetic energy. By firing engines at this precise moment, at peak velocity, one gains a greater change in orbital energy than would be possible at any other point along the trajectory. This represents the most efficient location to decelerate if the objective is to slow down, or to accelerate if the goal is to increase speed. For an interstellar object travelling at 60 km per second, reaching perihelion presents an opportunity to fundamentally alter its trajectory. Without an orbital maneuver, Oumuamua is destined for expulsion. Its hyperbolic orbit will carry it past the Sun and back into the vastness of interstellar space. However, applying thrust at perihelion, even a mere few kilometers per second of delta V, can transform a flyby into a capture. It becomes possible to enter a bound orbit around the Sun, or to adjust the trajectory towards a specific destination, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, or any other desired location. The magnitude of thrust required is not exorbitant. A velocity change of 30 to 40 kilometers per second during October would suffice to intercept Earth between December 26, 2025 and January 9, 2026. This assumes the maneuver commences while obscured behind the Sun, the trajectory is adjusted surreptitiously, and the object then emerges on a new path that casual observers might not immediately recognize as altered. Loeb and his co-authors detail this scenario in their research paper, with the relevant figures illustrating delta V requirements for intercepting various planets at different times. Intercepting Earth necessitates more thrust than closer planets due to orbital mechanics, but it remains within the capabilities of advanced propulsion systems. Chemical rockets could achieve this. We have engineered systems capable of 30 km per second delta V changes. While large, expensive, and requiring substantial fuel mass, they are a reality. A civilization capable of interstellar travel would possess superior options. Nuclear thermal propulsion, fusion drives, technologies we can conceptualize even if we cannot yet construct them, would render 30 km per second trivial, unconstrained by the limitations of the rocket equation. Thus, the possibility exists. An object concealed behind the Sun at the optimal point for trajectory modification, possessing the necessary thrust capabilities to reach Earth within 2 months. The question then becomes whether possibility translates to probability, and whether this scenario warrants serious consideration or should be relegated to the realm of science fiction. Financial markets apparently deem it worthy of contemplation. Loeb remarked in one of his interviews that if Oumuamua were to maneuver towards Earth, if it emerged from behind the Sun on a collision course, the stock market would undoubtedly experience a significant downturn. This would not necessarily be due to the likelihood of impact itself. Oumuamua is not sufficiently massive to cause an extinction-level event. Rather, the crash would stem from the profound implications of such a maneuver, the confirmation of technology, of intelligence, and the shattering of the fundamental assumption that humanity is alone. This realization would send shockwaves through every human-constructed system. Economic models are predicated on specific boundary conditions. Political frameworks operate within defined parameters. If those boundaries suddenly expand to encompass active alien civilizations actively observing our solar system, the stability of all systems would be compromised. Uncertainty would skyrocket, risk calculations would become obsolete, and the models we employ to predict the future would cease to function. Therefore, yes, the market would plummet, not as a result of physics, but as a consequence of psychology. However, market crashes presuppose awareness of the maneuver. They assume Oumuamua would visibly alter its course, emerging on a new trajectory that is undeniably divergent. What if the change is subtle? What if the object's revised trajectory appears sufficiently natural that only meticulous analysis reveals the deviation? What if it emerges from behind the sun and continues outward, seemingly unchanged, but with minor course corrections that will only manifest their effect at a later stage? We won't have a definitive answer for months, possibly not until after someone recalculates the object's trajectory using data gathered later and discovers a deviation. By that point, the celestial body could have already deployed its own instruments, released its cargo, or completed whatever mission it was designed for. This hidden phase presents a perfect opportunity for concealment. It's not that the sun is actively hiding information, but rather that the alignment of timing and celestial positioning creates a gap in our observational capabilities. This natural blind spot is an advantage any intelligent entity would seize if given the chance. Visibility will be restored in December. 3i Atlas is expected to reappear from behind the sun in early December, becoming observable from Earth once more. The object will be on its outward journey, moving away from the sun and continuing its voyage towards the outer reaches of the solar system. Telescopes will reacquire it, observations will recommence, and within a few weeks, we will possess sufficient data to determine its revised orbital path. This calculation will resolve critical questions. Has its course been altered? Is it still following its original hyperbolic trajectory, or has something caused a change? Are there any unexplained increases in speed, course corrections, or maneuvers? If the orbit remains unchanged, if 3i Atlas proceeds exactly as anticipated, then its closest approach to the sun was unremarkable. The object passed near the sun, experienced warming, released more gas and dust, but essentially remained an inert entity. A comet behaving as comets do, nothing more. However, if the orbit has changed even slightly, we face a significant problem. Natural comets do not execute orbital adjustments. They do not alter their paths during their perihelion. Any departure from the predicted course would signify the influence of forces beyond mere gravity, beyond typical outgassing, beyond anything a passive mass of ice and dust should produce. The importance of the calculations made in December is far greater than most people understand. It transcends mere academic interest. It's a crucial test. We will either confirm our current understanding of this object's nature, or be forced to confront the possibility that our comprehension is fundamentally flawed. On December 19th, 2025, 3i Atlas will make its closest approach to Earth. While still at a considerable distance, 269 million kilometers, it will be nearer to us than it has been since its initial detection. This proximity will be close enough for every major telescope to observe simultaneously, allowing for the collection of an immense volume of data within a limited time frame. The astronomical community is actively preparing for this event. Proposals for observations have been submitted, and telescope time has been allocated. Space-based observatories are scheduling their viewing periods. If there has ever been an opportune moment to obtain definitive data about 3i Atlas, that moment is December 19th. However, by then the pivotal event will have already transpired. Whatever occurred during its perihelion passage will be in the past. The observations made in December will reveal the consequences, not the event itself. We will be examining the outcomes, not the process. This is the core frustration underlying the entire situation. We are perpetually observing after the fact, constantly piecing together past events from residual clues and traces. The universe does not perform for our convenience. Events unfold irrespective of whether we are witnessing them, and the most significant events tend to occur when we are not looking. 3i Atlas did not deliberately choose its trajectory to evade detection during perihelion. The principles of orbital mechanics dictated its path, driven by the laws of physics, unconcerned with our limitations in observation. The fact that this path creates a blind spot at the most critical juncture is purely a matter of geometry. However, if one were an intelligent entity navigating interstellar space, if one were choosing the optimal moment for critical maneuvers, and if one were aware that the civilizations being visited possess surveillance blind spots, one would synchronize actions accordingly. Sensitive operations would be conducted when observers are unable to see. One would await geometrical conditions conducive to concealment, and one would rely on the assumption that the inhabitants would perceive it all as natural, as mere coincidence, the product of physics and chance rather than deliberate design and intent. Perhaps this is precisely what is unfolding at this very moment. On October 29th, the sun shines intensely between Earth and 3i Atlas. The object traverses its perihelion, concealed and beyond our reach, undertaking whatever actions it is programmed to perform within the privacy afforded by darkness. Alternatively, it may simply be a comet, warmed by solar radiation, expelling gas and dust, following a path established 4 billion years ago when it first coalesced in a distant star system. Perhaps the observational blind spot is irrelevant because there is nothing to conceal. We will ascertain the truth in December when the celestial geometry shifts, when 3i Atlas re-emerges into observable space, and when we can once again direct our instruments towards it to calculate any changes that may have occurred during those 51 days of darkness. Until then, we wait, and we contemplate what transpires in the unseen realms. Chapter 7. Conspiracy Theories. Thunderdome. The Jeffrey Epstein destruction theory surfaced within 72 hours of 3i Atlas's identification. Social media discussions proposed that the announcement was a calculated maneuver to overshadow the release of unsealed court documents, suggesting the government required a significant scientific narrative to dominate public attention, thereby diverting focus from uncomfortable revelations concerning influential individuals. Lowe's response was characteristically forthright. 3i Atlas is a physical entity in the sky, distant from Earth, and its existence cannot be fabricated because it was independently observed from multiple vantage points by both the Hubble Space Telescope and terrestrial telescopes. Anyone can acquire a half-meter telescope and observe it themselves. Its presence has no bearing on earthly political matters. The object is real. Any individual possessing adequate equipment can confirm its existence. The timing of its discovery coincides with when it became sufficiently luminous to be detected, not with any news cycle. To suggest otherwise implies a belief that astronomers globally conspired to perpetrate a deception involving falsified data from numerous independent facilities. However, conspiratorial thinking operates differently. It does not necessitate comprehensive coordination. It merely requires doubt. Once the possibility of concealment is introduced, once the notion that authorities are not disclosing the full truth takes hold, every subsequent piece of information is interpreted through that prejudiced lens. Evidence supporting the official narrative becomes proof of a cover-up. Denial itself becomes evidence of a cover-up. The theory thus becomes impervious to falsification. Other variations subsequently emerged. Anti-Semitic attacks were directed at Lowe, specifically suggesting that his Jewish or Israeli heritage influenced his analysis, implying he harbored ulterior motives for promoting extraterrestrial theories, as if ethnic background dictated scientific conclusions, or as if nationality held more weight than empirical data. Lowe acknowledged these attacks on his blog with a sense of weary resignation. This led me to the realization that the most straightforward answer to Fermi's question, "Where is everybody?" might be that extraterrestrial civilizations do not perceive us as sufficiently intelligent to warrant their attention. Considering these conspiracy theories, I cannot fault them. It is a pointed observation. If we are incapable of distinguishing between physical objects observable by anyone with a telescope and elaborate governmental diversions, if we attribute scientific analyses to ethnic conspiracies rather than to evidence, then perhaps we're not yet prepared for contact with advanced intelligence. Perhaps we remain too tribal, too quick to suspect hidden agendas, too reluctant to accept that sometimes a comet can be complex without being a fabrication. Yet, there are other theories that are not so easily dismissed. These are the ones that do not rely on belief in coordinated deceptions or ethnic conspiracies. These are the ones that take the data seriously and extrapolate them into unusual territories. The Oumuamua communication network theory originated on Reddit, gained traction on Twitter, and eventually found its way into blog posts and YouTube videos. The underlying concept is simple. 3i Atlas did not arrive alone. It is theorized to be communicating with Oumuamua, the first interstellar object to traverse our solar system in 2017, and which is now venturing back into deep space. According to this theory, the WOW signal was not directed at Earth. Instead, it was transmitted from Oumuamua to 3i Atlas, serving as a relay message. Oumuamua purportedly conducted its reconnaissance, gathered data on the inner solar system, detected Earth's radio emissions, and subsequently transmitted a report back in the direction from which 3i Atlas was approaching. The signal we detected is considered leakage, akin to overhearing a private conversation. 3i Atlas allegedly received the message, subtly adjusted its trajectory, a maneuver too minute for us to detect from interstellar distances, and set a course that would bring it in proximity to Venus, Mars, and Jupiter. It arrived 48 years later to conduct a more detailed survey based on the information provided by Oumuamua. This theory is creative. It aligns with the timing. It offers an explanation for the anomalous properties exhibited by both objects and their resistance to straightforward classification. They are not natural comets masquerading as spacecraft. Rather, they are spacecraft designed to appear as natural comets. The challenge lies in its verification. Oumuamua is now gone, too distant and faint to be observed. We cannot revisit the past to search for any transmissions we might have missed, nor can we confirm whether it ever emitted signals towards the region where 3i Atlas was travelling. While the theory is consistent with our current knowledge, it remains untestable. And untestable theories, regardless of their elegance, do not constitute science. Then there is the Mars connection. John Brandenburg, a physicist specializing in plasma, has long advocated the idea that Mars once harbored a civilization that was annihilated in a nuclear cataclysm. He points to isotopic ratios in the Martian atmosphere, unusual concentrations of xenon and other noble gases, and what he interprets as evidence of immense nuclear detonations on the planet's surface. The mainstream scientific community disputes these claims. The observed isotopic ratios have natural explanations, including the stripping of the atmosphere by solar wind over billions of years. The surface features that Brandenburg attributes to nuclear blasts are more plausibly explained by asteroid impacts and volcanic activity. There is no credible evidence to support the existence of a past Martian civilization, whether nuclear or otherwise. However, if one accepts Brandenburg's hypothesis, 3i Atlas's close passage by Mars becomes significant. Why would an interstellar probe select such a specific trajectory? Perhaps it is investigating the remnants of events on Mars. Perhaps it is searching for techno-signatures, clues about the nature of the civilization that once existed there and the cause of its destruction. It is conceivable that 3i Atlas is an archaeological mission, and we are misinterpreting its reconnaissance as a threat. This theory builds speculation upon speculation. It requires acceptance of Brandenburg's nuclear Mars hypothesis, which in turn necessitates rejection of conventional planetary science. Subsequently, one must accept that 3i Atlas is artificial. Finally, one must assume its specific interest lies in an ancient Martian civilization rather than, for example, the currently active civilization on Earth. Each successive assumption diminishes the theory's plausibility, yet it represents the kind of narrative that readily proliferates. It connects disparate elements, constructs a grander story, and imbues events with meaning where there might only be random chance. Humans are inherently pattern-seeking creatures. We perceive connections even when none truly exist. The stealth hybrid asteroid spacecraft theory originates from a reader of Lowe's blog, an individual named Gab Osso. The proposition is that advanced civilizations would not construct spacecraft from raw materials. Instead, they would terraform existing natural objects, hollow out asteroids, install propulsion and life support systems, and conceal the technology beneath a veneer of natural rock and ice. This approach addresses multiple issues concurrently. It eliminates the need to transport all necessary shielding mass. The asteroid itself provides protection from radiation and impacts. The craft appears natural to any civilization observing it from a distance. Its electromagnetic emissions remain undetected. Its thermal signature is masked by the thermal properties of the surrounding rock encasing its habitat. Humanity is already contemplating asteroid mining missions, as Zorka pointed out. For a more advanced civilization, this could be standard practice. Why construct new vessels when existing space rocks can be repurposed? If 3I Atlas were a stealth hybrid, external observations would be insufficient to reveal its true nature. It would appear as a comet because, in essence, it is a comet that has been modified internally. The industrial nickel signature, the unusual chemical composition, and the discrepancy in mass could all be explained by internal technology disguised as natural phenomena. The theory is unfalsifiable. Any observation that seemingly confirms a natural origin could be interpreted as successful camouflage. Conversely, any anomaly could be construed as evidence of the concealed technology. The theory adapts to accommodate whatever data we uncover, which is both its strength and its weakness. A theory that explains everything ultimately explains nothing. If one cannot conceive of an observation that would disprove the hypothesis, then it ceases to be science and becomes metaphysics. Nevertheless, it is a compelling idea. It compels one to view 3I Atlas differently, not as a rocky body that might be technological, but as technology deliberately engineered to resemble a rocky body. The deception lies not in concealing the object's presence, which is clearly visible, but in obscuring its fundamental nature. The dark matter bubble theory surfaced on 4chan, which should immediately warrant a healthy dose of skepticism. The assertion is that 3I Atlas is not an object at all, but rather a bubble of dark matter or dark energy originating from the Big Bang. It does not reflect sunlight in the manner of ordinary matter. It is believed to siphon energy from other sources. The observed green luminescence is attributed to interactions between dark energy and ordinary space. This theory possesses the characteristic of being entirely incorrect in intriguing ways. It demonstrates a misunderstanding of dark matter, its behavior, and the products of the Big Bang. It is not even incorrect in a manner that allows for proper testing due to its incoherence, yet it has nonetheless spread, being adopted by fringe websites and generating YouTube videos replete with ominous soundtracks and dramatic narration. The fact that it is nonsensical did not deter individuals from believing it, as it offers an explanation that feels scientific without requiring any genuine understanding of scientific principles. Dark matter is enigmatic. The Big Bang is enigmatic. 3I Atlas is enigmatic. Connecting these mysteries provides an answer that satisfies the need for meaning without the rigour of earnest contemplation. The 4chan theory. Separately, one more notion deserves consideration: the decoy within a decoy. This concept was proposed by Omar D, and its recursive nature is profoundly disorienting. What if 3I Atlas is not the distraction itself? What if the ongoing debate surrounding 3I Atlas is the actual diversion? While astronomers meticulously debate whether it is natural or artificial, while the public remains fixated on alien motherships and governmental cover-ups, and while substantial resources are channeled into observing this single object, something else entirely may be unfolding that we are not noticing at all. Perhaps the true reconnaissance occurred years ago. Perhaps Oumuamua was sufficient. Perhaps 3I Atlas is merely a theatrical performance designed to keep our attention fixed on the obvious, while the actual operation proceeds in complete obscurity. It is a nested paranoia, one layer within another. However, it raises an uncomfortable question. How would we know if a sufficiently advanced intelligence sought to observe us without detection if it aimed to deploy assets throughout the solar system without triggering our awareness? How would they achieve this? They would provide us with something overtly apparent to obsess over. They would ensure that we exhaust our attention on the distraction, thereby overlooking the substantive matter. And the elegant aspect from a strategic standpoint is that proposing this possibility immediately brands one as irrational. Thus, even if it were true, even if this is precisely what is occurring, anyone suggesting it would be dismissed as a conspiracy theorist, effectively safeguarding the strategy. Perhaps the true measure of intelligence is not our ability to detect the obvious, but rather our capacity to maintain sufficient skepticism about the obvious to perceive what is concealed alongside it. Chapter 8. Pascal's Wager for the End of the World. Blaise Pascal, a 17th century mathematician and philosopher, formulated a renowned argument concerning the existence of God. The wager posits the following: if God exists and one believes, infinite reward is gained. If God exists and one does not believe, infinite punishment is faced. If God does not exist, belief or disbelief carries finite consequences in either case. Therefore, rational self-interest dictates belief, as infinite stakes supersede any finite calculation. The logic of this argument is debatable. Philosophers have spent centuries dissecting it. However, the underlying principle, that one should take seriously any scenario with catastrophic implications, even if its probability appears low, has applications extending beyond theology. Lowe applies this principle to 3i Atlas. Even if the likelihood of a technological origin is minimal, even if 99% of the evidence points towards a natural explanation, the implications of that remaining 1% are so severe that we cannot afford to disregard the possibility. We must prepare for the black swan event, the low probability, high impact scenario that can devastate civilizations caught unaware. There is currently no established protocol for such an event. No emergency response plan exists for the discovery of active alien technology within our solar system. NASA possesses procedures for asteroid deflection and plans for responding to detected impact threats in advance. These plans are predicated on physics we comprehend, objects following predictable trajectories, and challenges we can model and prepare for. They do not account for intelligence. They do not anticipate an object that might maneuver, deploy assets, or possess intentions that we cannot foresee. The entire framework of planetary defense is constructed around natural threats, rocks drifting through space governed by gravitational laws. 3i Atlas challenges this framework, not because it is definitively artificial, but because we cannot definitively exclude that possibility. An uncertainty regarding intentions is far more perilous than certainty regarding random celestial mechanics. Lowe authored a white paper for the United Nations, submitting it in late September 2025, shortly before the Mars flyby. The document advocates for the establishment of an international committee tasked with monitoring and analysing interstellar objects for potential technological signatures. This would be a coordinated effort to assess anomalies, share data across national borders, and develop response protocols for scenarios we hope will never materialise. The paper clearly articulates the rationale. The Vera C, Rubin Observatory, which commenced operations this year, is projected to detect dozens to hundreds of interstellar objects over the next decade. 3i Atlas represents merely the beginning. More will follow. Some will be inanimate rocks, others will be comets. And statistically, if the dark forest hypothesis holds any validity, if advanced civilizations dispatch probes throughout the galaxy, then some of these objects may indeed be reconnaissance platforms. We require an infrastructure to identify which of these warrant heightened scrutiny. We need agreed upon criteria for escalating concern, for initiating deeper investigations, and for determining when an object's behaviour transcends natural explanation. This preparation is necessary before a crisis arises, not during one. The United Nations has not issued a public response. International committees operate with deliberate speed. Proposals can become entangled in bureaucracy. deferred for further deliberation, or lost amidst competing priorities. A white paper from a single astrophysicist, regardless of their credentials, does not automatically compel institutional action. However, the absence of a response creates its own form of vulnerability. Presently, if 3i Atlas were to exhibit unambiguous technological behavior, if it were to transmit signals, maneuver towards Earth, or deploy visible probes, there is no coordinated mechanism in place to decide the subsequent course of action. Individual nations would react based on their own interests, their own threat assessments, and their own capabilities. Such fragmentation could prove catastrophic. Military responses might occur without diplomatic coordination. Conflicting narratives about the object's nature and intentions could emerge. Decisions driven by panic, based on incomplete information, could be made. The scenarios that cause sleepless nights are not those involving a perfect response to a clear threat. They are the kind of situations where confusion and a failure to communicate transform manageable circumstances into complete catastrophes. The concept known as the dark forest hypothesis offers one perspective on this matter. The term originates from a science fiction novel penned by Legixon, but the underlying idea is much older. If the cosmos is teeming with numerous intelligent species, and if their access to resources is inherently limited, and if one cannot ascertain the true intentions of other beings until the moment it is too late to mount a defense, then the most prudent strategy involves maintaining absolute silence and proactively neutralizing any potential adversaries. Civilizations that make their presence known invariably face destruction. Those that manage to endure are the ones that remain concealed, that strike first when they detect other intelligences, and that never gamble with unknown entities. The galaxy then becomes akin to a dark forest, with every civilization acting as a hunter, and every sound emanating from the shadows potentially signaling another hunter preparing to fire. Within this framework, the arrival of 3 Atlas in our solar system cannot be interpreted as a gesture of goodwill. It is in fact a preliminary act of observation preceding an act of elimination. The entity is systematically gathering intelligence regarding our capabilities, our defensive systems, and our technological standing. Once it has acquired the necessary information and has determined whether we represent a future threat, it or entities similar to it will take action. If one subscribes to the dark forest hypothesis, the implications of Pascal's wager become even more profound. The penalty for disregarding the possibility of extraterrestrial technology is not merely the forfeiture of an opportunity for contact. It is the complete annihilation of our civilization. There are no second chances when one is extinct. However, the dark forest scenario is merely one of many conceivable outcomes. Other interpretations exist. It is plausible that advanced civilizations are inherently benevolent, possessing a keen interest in fostering the development of less mature species. Alternatively, they might be utterly indifferent, pursuing their own objectives without any regard for nascent cultures such as ours. It is also conceivable that they are purely scientific in nature, observing us in a manner analogous to how we might study ant colonies, with detached curiosity but devoid of any moral consideration. We simply do not possess the knowledge to ascertain the truth. We have absolutely no empirical data concerning alien civilizations to draw upon. All of our theoretical frameworks are purely speculative, comprising mental exercises or extrapolations based on human behavior, which may not be applicable to minds shaped by entirely different evolutionary trajectories. This inherent uncertainty is precisely what renders the process of planning a response so exceedingly challenging. One cannot effectively defend against threats that are entirely unknown. One cannot engage in meaningful negotiation with intentions that are utterly unpredictable. One cannot adequately prepare for scenarios when the range of potential scenarios is virtually boundless. So, what course of action remains available to us? The answer proposed by Lowe is a two-pronged approach. Firstly, the imperative is to gather data. We must observe the 3 Atlas with the utmost thoroughness. We must meticulously document any behavior that definitively precludes a natural explanation. If it exhibits any form of maneuver, transmission, or deployment of any apparatus, this must be recorded without delay. Evidence serves to dispel uncertainty. Secondly, there is a critical need to implement redundancy within our observational systems. We cannot afford to rely solely on a few large telescopes that might be non-operational at the precise moment when crucial observations are to be made. The observational capability must be decentralized. This aligns with the methodology employed by the Galileo project. The utilization of numerous small observatories that continuously monitor the entire celestial sphere fosters resilience. Should any anomalous event occur, multiple independent systems will capture the data. This information cannot then be suppressed or dismissed as a mere equipment malfunction. Lowe also strongly advocates for a policy of transparency. Whatever discoveries are made, they must be disseminated openly. Information should not be classified. Access should not be restricted. Governments should not be permitted to exclusively control knowledge pertaining to potential alien technology. The greater the number of individuals who possess access to the data, the more challenging it becomes to manipulate the prevailing narrative. Furthermore, it increases the likelihood that someone will discern patterns that might be overlooked by official channels. This stance, however, is not without its detractors. Intelligence and defense agencies inherently favor control. They desire sufficient time to evaluate potential threats before public awareness incites widespread panic. They prioritize operational security, which entails the ability to devise responses without inadvertently broadcasting their intentions. While transparency may sound like a noble objective, it undeniably complicates strategic planning. Nevertheless, Lowe contends that the implementation of secrecy generates more significant problems. If governments choose to conceal evidence of extraterrestrial technology, and if access to such data is confined to classified channels, then public trust will inevitably erode when the truth eventually surfaces, and it always does. Secrets of such magnitude cannot be perpetually contained. Someone will eventually speak out, someone will share the information, and when that occurs, the revelation will be all the more devastating, as it will validate every conspiracy theory concerning governmental deception. It is far preferable to confront the truth collectively, to process its implications as a unified entity, rather than to pretend that such profound knowledge can be managed on behalf of populations deliberately kept in ignorance. Adult individuals are capable of confronting difficult realities. What they are demonstrably incapable of handling is the realization that they have been misled regarding the most fundamental question humanity has ever pondered. Are we alone in the universe? If 3 Atlas is indeed a natural celestial phenomenon, perhaps an unusually intriguing comet, then all of these considerations become moot. The proposed protocols will not be enacted. The specialized committee will not be convened. We will simply file away the experience as a reminder that nature is capable of producing unexpected phenomena, and we will proceed with our lives. However, if there exists even a remote possibility that our initial assessment is incorrect, if the observed anomalies suggest something that we are presently unprepared to acknowledge, then Pascal's wager becomes applicable. The cost associated with preparation, with treating this possibility with due seriousness, and with establishing the necessary infrastructure to detect and respond to extraterrestrial technology, is finite. Conversely, the cost of ignoring the potential threat and being mistaken is nothing less than the extinction of our species. When one frames the situation in this manner, when one acknowledges that we are engaging in a gamble with the very survival of our civilization, the logical conclusion becomes remarkably straightforward. One must prepare for the worst possible outcome, even while maintaining hope for the most favorable one. One must construct the systems that possess the potential to safeguard us, even if they are never ultimately required. One must give serious consideration to the long shot, because the consequence of dismissing it is irreversible. 3 Atlas is either a comet, or it is something else entirely. By the conclusion of December, we anticipate possessing more definitive data. New observations will become available following its perihelion, with trajectory calculations that account for any alterations, and chemical analyses as the object becomes active during its outward journey. This data will serve to narrow down the range of possibilities. It may even resolve the question entirely. Perhaps we will finally accumulate sufficient evidence to state with absolute certainty that the object is natural, that all observed anomalies can be explained by terrestrial phenomena, and that our pattern recognition was mistakenly applied to background noise rather than a genuine signal. Alternatively, it is possible that the data will only serve to deepen the enigma. We might discover new anomalies, additional deviations from expected behaviour, evidence that resists straightforward interpretation. We may very well cross a threshold where natural explanations cease to be adequate, where the cumulative weight of improbability compels us to contemplate alternatives that we have actively avoided. Regardless of the outcome, Pascal's wager suggests that we must be prepared, because making the wrong wager on this fundamental question implies that there will be no one left to learn from the error. Part 2. Let us now shift our focus to the latest developments in space exploration and scientific discovery. 3 days ago, an event transpired that NASA is endeavouring to prevent from causing public alarm. While you were asleep, an asteroid, comparable in size to a school bus, traversed a trajectory that brought it closer to Earth than the satellites currently transmitting this program to your screens. We failed to detect its approach until it had already completed its passage. However, this is not the sole reason for my recording this message at 3 o'clock in the morning, with my hands visibly trembling. Within the preceding 72 hours, we have witnessed Pentagon whistleblowers testifying under oath regarding unidentified aerial phenomena capable of withstanding direct missile strikes. NASA has discreetly confirmed the most compelling evidence to date of ancient life on Mars. Furthermore, numerous astronomers are now openly discussing the potential motivations behind alien civilizations intentionally remaining concealed from us, a phenomenon they refer to as a dark forest, where any self-disclosure inevitably leads to immediate annihilation. And here is what should genuinely concern you. All of this is occurring concurrently with a fierce competition between China and NASA to secure the most valuable territories on the Moon. The entity that achieves first access may well dictate the future trajectory of humanity's presence in space for all time. What you're about to hear may very well constitute the most significant space-related update you will ever encounter. Because if even half of the revelations this week prove to be accurate, our entire understanding of existence will be fundamentally altered. Before we delve into NASA's recent admission concerning Mars, kindly express your support by clicking the like button and subscribing if you wish to remain informed about these cosmic revelations. Please also share your thoughts in the comments section regarding whether we should continue broadcasting our location to the universe or immediately cease all transmissions. Kindly share this on X, Facebook, Reddit, or via your messenger to facilitate the growth of our community. We appreciate your unwavering support. Chapter 1. The Mars Revelation. Ancient life formally confirmed. Allow me to describe a geological specimen that is causing considerable consternation among planetary scientists. The concern stems not from its intrinsic nature, but from its profound implications for our established understanding of life throughout the cosmos. On the 21st of July 2024, NASA's Perseverance rover was meticulously traversing an ancient riverbed within Mars's Jezero crater when its cameras captured an image that rendered mission control speechless. Envision this: a rock, estimated to be 3 billion years old, designated by the nickname Char Falls, resting in situ, exhibiting patterned formations that bear an uncanny resemblance to features observed in ancient terrestrial life. These were termed leopard spots, dark annuli with paler central regions distributed across the rock's surface as if an imprint of natural artistry. You might be inclined to dismiss this as merely a speckled stone. However, this is where the situation becomes truly compelling. These are not arbitrary markings. When Perseverance directed its pixel instrument towards these distinct spots, the data obtained was, to put it mildly, significant enough to prompt even seasoned scientists to re-evaluate their retirement plans. The peripheral regions of these leopard spots were found to be rich in iron phosphate, specifically a mineral known as vivianite. The lighter central areas contained iron sulfide, likely in the form of greigite. If these chemical designations hold little immediate meaning for you, allow me to elaborate. On Earth, when we encounter these precise minerals in ancient rock formations arranged in these exact patterns, there is typically a singular, unequivocal explanation: microorganisms. These are the fossilized remnants of ancient bacteria that once thrived, respired, and ultimately perished within that sedimentary environment, leaving behind these characteristic chemical signatures akin to microscopic tombstones marking their existence. Contemplate this for a moment. We may be observing evidence of organisms that inhabited another planet prior to the evolutionary development of complex cellular structures on Earth. The Bright Angel Formation, the geological stratum where this rock was discovered, narrates a story that reads like a geological mystery novel. Approximately 3.5 billion years ago, this location was not the arid, rust-coloured desert we perceive today. It was, in fact, a lake, possibly possessing a temperate climate and abundant water, fed by river channels that had sculpted their way through the crater's rim. The sediments deposited at the bottom of this ancient lake subsequently transformed into the mudstone we are now examining. Encapsulated within this mudstone are organic carbon, sulfur, and phosphorus, all the essential components required for a microscopic biological ecosystem. However, this is where NASA's announcement gains a remarkable degree of significance, and it explains their extensive year-long peer review process before public disclosure. The specific arrangement of these minerals strongly suggests the occurrence of redox reactions, which are chemical processes involving the transfer of electrons, akin to transactions in a microscopic economy. On Earth, these reactions are frequently instigated and sustained by biological activity. Microorganisms utilize them to generate energy, functioning as minute biological batteries that are powered by chemical gradients. The particular confluence of elements observed in char falls, oxidized iron in one location, reduced sulfur in another, with organic matter acting as an intermediary, precisely mirrors what we would anticipate if ancient Martian microbes were engaged in a process analogous to cellular respiration. Joel Hurowitz, a researcher from Stony Brook University and lead author of the study recently published in the journal Nature, articulated this point with exceptional clarity. He stated that they are observing evidence of chemical reactions that, on Earth, are typically facilitated by biological agents. It is crucial to emphasize the word typically. It does not denote definitive biological origin, but rather suggests a strong correlation. This qualification highlights both the profound excitement and the inherent frustration associated with this discovery. We cannot definitively assert that these patterns were generated by life. Not yet, at least. There exist non-biological chemical processes that could potentially produce similar formations. Nevertheless, upon thorough examination by the research team, none of these alternative explanations fully accounted for the observed data. Elevated temperatures, for instance, could lead to the formation of some of these minerals, but the rock exhibits no indication of having undergone such thermal conditions. Similarly, acidic environments might contribute, but again, no supporting evidence has been found. It is akin to discovering footprints in one's garden. While theoretically they could have been made by something other than feet, at some point, the most straightforward explanation must be seriously considered. What elevates the significance of this discovery even further is its placement within the broader timeline of Martian history. Scientists previously theorized that if life ever existed on Mars, it would have been confined to the planet's earliest epochs, when it still possessed a substantial atmosphere and a protective magnetic field. However, the Bright Angel Formation predates these conditions, being considerably younger. This implies that even after Mars had largely lost its atmospheric shield and had begun its metamorphosis into the frigid, desolate world we observe today, pockets may have still existed where life could have persisted, veritable oases within an increasingly inhospitable environment. The implications of this finding extend far beyond Mars. If life emerged independently on two planets within the same solar system, what does this portend for the rest of the universe? Are we witnessing proof that life is not a mere cosmic anomaly, but rather an inevitable outcome of the right chemical conditions and environmental factors? Or, and this is where the implications become somewhat unsettling, could life have originated not independently on both worlds, but rather transitorily, travelling between them? This could have occurred via meteorites ejected into space by colossal ancient impacts. We are aware that rocky material can indeed traverse such interstellar distances. We have recovered Martian meteorites here on Earth. Could life have undertaken the same journey? These questions transcend mere academic curiosity. NASA is already formulating plans for sample return missions, intending to bring these Martian materials back to Earth for analysis, with instruments far more sophisticated than any currently deployable on the Martian surface. The sample, collected by Perseverance from Char Falls via drilling, is currently sealed within a tube, awaiting a future mission to retrieve and transport it back home. When this occurs, likely in the early part of the next decade, assuming all projected timelines are met, we will finally possess the capacity to answer the question that has perplexed humanity since our initial gaze upon that ruddy celestial body in the night sky. Were we ever alone? However, while NASA's focus is directed toward ancient, potentially extinct microbial life, something far more immediate and potentially perilous has been unfolding closer to home. Pentagon whistleblowers are coming forward with assertions that render the Mars discovery seemingly insignificant by comparison. According to their testimonies, we are not merely confronting ancient fossils, but rather encountering technology that defies our current understanding of physics and governmental cover-ups of unprecedented depth. The shroud of secrecy is finally beginning to dissipate, revealing a reality that will fundamentally alter your perception of our place in the cosmos. Chapter 2: The UFO Disclosure Crisis. Pentagon whistleblowers initiate counter-offensive. Imagine this scenario: September the 9th, 2025. Within the confines of a crowded congressional hearing room, military veterans with decades of cumulative service are raising their right hands to take an oath. They are about to provide testimony regarding matters that could jeopardize their careers, tarnish their reputations, and potentially expose them to legal repercussions. Yet, they proceed nonetheless, driven by the conviction that what they have witnessed, what they know, is far too critical to remain concealed. The inaugural witness to present their account was Dylan Borland, an Air Force veteran who was stationed at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. His voice, though steady, carried the palpable weight of his impending revelations. In December of 2023, he personally observed phenomena that the Pentagon had a profound interest in suppressing. Multiple unidentified aerial phenomena, what were formerly referred to as UFOs before the government officially rebranded them, were observed hovering over one of America's most heavily fortified military installations. Their presence was not fleeting, lasting for weeks rather than mere minutes. These were not distant lights or ambiguous radar signatures. These were clearly discernible objects, exhibiting characteristics that defied all known principles of aerodynamics, loitering within restricted airspace as if they possessed sovereign dominion. However, it was at this juncture that Borland's testimony took a turn that caused every individual in that hearing room to lean forward with rapt attention. Upon reporting these sightings through the established official channels, thereby adhering strictly to military protocol, he was met not with mere skepticism, but with something far more insidious. He was subjected to professional ostracization. His security clearance was threatened. Job prospects within federal intelligence agencies abruptly vanished. The implicit message was unequivocally clear: remain silent or face professional ruin. Consider this for a moment. A decorated military veteran observes what could be potential threats to national security, reports these observations through the appropriate channels, and instead of receiving commendation, he is subjected to punitive measures. What does this revelation suggest about the true nature of events? Either our government is astonishingly inept at addressing genuine security concerns, or they possess intimate knowledge of these objects' origins and are paralysed by the prospect of such information becoming public. Subsequently, Representative Eric Swalwell from California performed an unexpected action. He presented a video recording, not of some grainy, ambiguous footage that could represent anything from a weather balloon to a common bird. This was military-grade visual data captured by an MQ-9 Reaper drone operating in the vicinity of Yemen in October of 2024. The room fell into an absolute silence as they witnessed a perfectly spherical orb moving at speeds that defied conventional understanding traversing the screen. Then came a moment that rendered all rational explanation utterly impossible. The Reaper drone unleashed a Hellfire missile directly at the object. The impact was direct. The ensuing explosion filled the screen, and as the smoke dissipated, the orb remained, entirely unscathed, continuing its trajectory as if the missile strike had never occurred. Allow that assertion to truly resonate. A Hellfire missile, engineered to obliterate tanks and fortified bunkers, had absolutely no discernible effect on this object. The very weapon system that has been the cornerstone of American military superiority for decades proved to be as effective as a water balloon. Swalwell's inquiry to the assembled panel was succinct yet devastating. Why are we being denied access to this critical information? What other crucial intelligence has been deliberately withheld from Congress, from the American populace, and indeed from the global community? The Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, commonly known as AARO, an organization purportedly established to investigate these phenomena with unwavering transparency and rigorous scientific methodology, was revealed to be anything but. Witness after witness detailed how AARO dismisses cases without adequate investigation, disregards compelling evidence, and appears to be more committed to debunking rather than genuine discovery. Jeffrey Chilcott, another Air Force veteran on the panel, characterized AARO's methodology as employing scientific reasoning to arrive at predetermined conclusions, rather than allowing the evidence to dictate the outcome. However, the most significant revelation emerged when journalist George Knapp took the podium. Knapp has dedicated over 3 decades to investigating unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, and he presented information that sent shockwaves throughout the defense establishment. According to multiple credible sources, a clandestine Pentagon program, designated Immaculate Constellation, is allegedly in operation. The very name of this program should send a shiver down your spine. This is not a matter of routine classification. It is a special access program so highly guarded that a considerable number of congressional members are entirely unaware of its existence. And what is the purported function of Immaculate Constellation? It is reportedly involved in the collection and analysis of UAP encounters that are deemed too sensitive, too paradigm-altering, to be processed through conventional governmental channels. The Pentagon's response was predictably swift and immediate. They categorically denied any knowledge of a program bearing that specific designation. However, the fundamental nature of classified programs is precisely their deniability. That is their inherent purpose. The individuals issuing such denials may themselves be unaware of the program's existence. Or, more disconcertingly, they may possess full knowledge of its operations and are deliberately providing false information, confident that the classification system will shield them from any accountability. What lends exceptional weight to this testimony is the caliber of the individuals providing it. These are not fringe theorists broadcasting unsubstantiated claims from isolated locations. We are referring to senior military personnel, individuals who have held top-secret clearances, and persons who have dedicated their lives to serving and protecting this nation. When individuals are willing to risk everything to come forward, when they expose themselves to potential prosecution under the Espionage Act simply to convey the truth, Perhaps we ought to pay attention. The proposed UAP whistleblower protection legislation, put forth by Representatives Tim Burchett and Anna Paulina Luna, signifies a pivotal juncture. For the very first time, legal safeguards would be extended to those who provide information concerning these programs. Consider the implications of this development. Congress perceives the necessity of enacting specific legislation solely to shield individuals who wish to disclose what they have witnessed in our skies. This is not a standard procedure. This is not how a transparent democratic system is designed to operate. Senior Chief Petty Officer Alexandro Wiggins of the Navy delivered perhaps the most disturbing account. He recounted encounters with craft exhibiting capabilities that defy our current theoretical understanding. They possessed the ability for instantaneous acceleration from a stationary position to hypersonic velocities. They could execute right-angle turns at speeds that should shatter any known material. Furthermore, they demonstrated the capacity to operate fluidly across air, water, and space without any discernible means of propulsion. These are not merely advanced aerial vehicles. These represent technologies that appear to function based on entirely distinct physical principles. The ramifications are profound. If these entities represent foreign adversaries, then America has already relinquished its technological supremacy, a fact we are currently unaware of. If, however, these are manifestations of a clandestine American endeavour, then we are confronting a rogue civilization operating within our own governmental structure, wielding technology that is decades or even centuries beyond public knowledge. And should there exist something else entirely, something not originating from Earth, then every fundamental assumption about our position in the cosmos must be re-evaluated. Joe Spielberger of the Project on Government Oversight articulated a critical point during his testimony. This issue transcends mere unidentified aerial phenomena. It pertains to governmental accountability, constitutional oversight, and the fundamental democratic right of the populace to be informed about their government's activities. When programs exist that are so deeply classified that even Congress cannot access them, when military personnel face threats for reporting potential security risks, when evidence is systematically concealed or destroyed, the essence of democracy is undermined. A different form of governance emerges. The recurring pattern is becoming undeniably apparent. Witness after witness, incident after incident, the corroborating evidence continues to accumulate. This is not confined to American military personnel. Similar accounts are emerging from Canada, Brazil, Japan, and France. Either we're experiencing a widespread coordinated delusion affecting trained observers across the globe, or something truly extraordinary is unfolding in our skies. However, while Congress advocates for transparency and whistleblowers risk everything to expose the truth, a more sinister possibility lurks in the periphery of scientific speculation. What if the rationale behind this pervasive secrecy is not to conceal the existence of extraterrestrial beings, but rather to obscure the very reasons for their continued reticence? What if Earth has already been identified by civilizations that perceive our burgeoning presence in space not as a welcome development, but as a threat necessitating immediate elimination? The universe might be considerably more perilous than we have ever conceived, and we may have already made a catastrophic misstep. Chapter 3. The Dark Forest. Precept. Why extraterrestrials might remain concealed. Envision yourself navigating an utterly dark forest at night. Visibility extends mere feet in any direction. You are aware of the presence of others within this forest, akin to yourself, armed and potentially dangerous. Every rustle could signify peril, every movement could betray your location. Survival hinges on maintaining absolute silence. The instant you reveal yourself, the moment you emit any sound, you become a target. This is the universe as depicted by the dark forest theory. It may offer an explanation for the cosmos's eerie stillness, despite the mathematical probability that we are not alone. This theory gained widespread recognition through the science fiction trilogy by Chinese author Liu Cixin. though its conceptual roots delve deeper into game theory, evolutionary psychology, and the stark mathematics of survival. Herein lies the chilling logic. Every civilization's paramount objective is self-preservation. There is no definitive method to ascertain whether another civilization is inherently hostile or benevolent. Even if their current disposition appears peaceful, they could evolve to become antagonistic. Consequently, the most prudent course of action is to eradicate any detected civilization before it can annihilate you. This leads to the inevitable conclusion that all intelligent civilizations remain hidden, and any that expose themselves are promptly annihilated. Dr. David Brin, a distinguished astrophysicist who contributed to the development of this concept prior to Liu Cixin's popularization, articulates it with even greater starkness. He posits that somewhere within our galaxy, ancient autonomous machines, which he terms berserker probes, might exist, remnants of long-extinct civilizations. Their sole function is to detect and destroy any emergent intelligence. A single broadcast, a solitary signal reaching unintended receivers, or more accurately unintended sensors, could precipitate a visit from an entity that renders our nuclear arsenals insignificant. Consider humanity's historical actions. For over a century we've been broadcasting into the vast emptiness of space. Radio transmissions, television signals, military radar, all have propagated outward in an ever-expanding sphere of electromagnetic radiation that now encompasses thousands of star systems. We're akin to children playing with matches in a darkened warehouse filled with explosives, utterly oblivious to the potential dangers we might be attracting. This sphere of signals, travelling at the speed of light, has already reached star systems such as Wolf 359, Ross 128, and Luyten's star. If any form of intelligent life inhabits these systems, they are aware of our presence. The situation, however, becomes more grave. In 1974, we deliberately dispatched the Arecibo message towards the globular cluster M13, a densely packed collection of stars approximately 25,000 light-years distant. This was not an accidental emission. It was a deliberate broadcast into the darkness, complete with information regarding our biology, our solar system, and even our genetic makeup. Carl Sagan referred to it as a cosmic calling card. Others might interpret it as a suicide note. While it will not reach its intended destination for millennia, that message, that intentional declaration of our existence, is now irreversible and unstoppable, hurtling through space like a cosmic confession. The statistical probabilities of detection exacerbate the precariousness of our situation. Dr. Jason Wright of Penn State University has calculated that a civilization merely 1,000 years more advanced than ours could detect Earth's biosignatures from hundreds of light-years away. The oxygen present in our atmosphere, the methane emitted from our agricultural activities, and the industrial pollutants we have discharged into the air collectively form a spectroscopic fingerprint that clearly indicates an inhabited planet to any entity possessing a sufficiently powerful telescope. We are not merely broadcasting our existence through radio waves. Our planet itself serves as a beacon. Shortly before his passing, Stephen Hawking issued a warning against actively attempting to establish contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. His reasoning was both simple and chilling. He implored us to consider the historical outcomes of encounters between European explorers and civilizations with significantly less advanced technology on Earth. The consequences for the indigenous populations were catastrophic. Now, imagine that technological disparity amplified by thousands or millions of years. We would not be conquered. We would be inadvertently crushed, akin to ants beneath a colossal footstep, possibly without the advanced civilization even noticing. The Fermi paradox suddenly assumes a horrifying clarity through this perspective. We do not observe evidence of extraterrestrial civilizations not because they do not exist, but because those that reveal themselves were eradicated, and the survivors learned the paramount importance of concealment. the great cosmic silence is not an emptiness, but a reflection of profound fear. Every intelligent species that masters radio astronomy also grasps the game theory principle that dictates remain silent or perish, all except, it appears, ourselves. Dr. Alexander Berezin from Russia's National University of Electronic Technology has proposed an even more somber variation. What if the inaugural civilization to achieve interstellar travel capabilities inevitably eradicates all others, not out of malevolence, but as a consequence of simple expansion? This is analogous to a bacterial colony consuming all available resources within a petri dish. Such a civilization might not even register the lesser species it obliterates. We could face annihilation not through deliberate attack, but as unintended collateral damage resulting from another entity's expansion. The recent disclosures concerning UAP take on a distinct character when viewed through the lens of the dark forest theory. What if these observed phenomena are not the result of visitors, but rather of reconnaissance missions? What if their purpose is not to initiate contact, but to assess whether we constitute a threat? The fact that they appear to exhibit particular interest in our military installations and nuclear facilities offers little reassurance. They are scrutinizing our weaponry, evaluating our capabilities, and determining whether we represent an immediate threat requiring neutralization or a risk that can be safely disregarded for several more decades. There is a disturbing consistency to the temporal pattern. UFO sightings escalated significantly after the detonation of the first atomic bombs. It is as if crossing the nuclear threshold activated some form of observational protocol. We announced to the universe our mastery over atomic fission, and suddenly entities began appearing to monitor us. Perhaps their intention is not invasion, but rather to decide if preemptive elimination is necessary before we evolve into a genuine global threat. Game theory substantiates this paranoid interpretation. In scenarios termed a prisoner's dilemma with infinite stakes, the rational decision invariably involves defection, striking first. Cooperation is only viable when repeated interactions and mutual benefit can be guaranteed. However, when the very survival of a species is at stake, and the intentions of other participants cannot be verified, the mathematical conclusion dictates their destruction before they can destroy you. This is not an act of malice, it is a logical imperative, which might be even more unsettling. Some scientists contend that we have already passed the point of no return. Dr. Eugene Tucker refers to this as cosmic pessimism, the acknowledgement that we have inadvertently revealed ourselves and now can only await a response. Each passing year without confirmed contact could signify our solitary existence. Alternatively, it could indicate that something is already en route, traversing space at a fraction of the speed of light, destined to arrive within decades or centuries with capabilities we cannot comprehend and intentions we dare not contemplate. The dark forest theory also elucidates why SETI has yielded no results, despite decades of diligent searching. We are seeking signals from civilizations that are actively broadcasting their presence. However, if this theory holds true, any civilization sufficiently advanced to develop radio technology would also be intelligent enough to immediately cease its use upon realizing the inherent risks. We are essentially searching for the cosmic equivalent of defunct civilizations, those that failed to comprehend the existential game in time. Yet, a particular group asserts they possess precise knowledge of why this silence is poised to be shattered, why the dark forest may soon erupt into open conflict. According to their interpretation of recent events, Earth and the Moon are destined to become the theatre for a confrontation between competing civilizations. The race between NASA and China is not merely about national pride or scientific accomplishment. It is a struggle to secure strategic high ground before the true conflict commences. Chapter 4. The Lunar Race Intensifies. China versus NASA's Covert Objectives. On the 8th of October 2025, an unprecedented event occurred within the commercial space sector. Stoke Space, a company largely unknown to the public, announced it had secured $510 million in a single funding round. These funds were not derived from government contracts or NASA, but from private investors who are betting that this relatively obscure company is poised to revolutionize space travel in ways that even SpaceX has not envisioned. Send only text, no instructions or comments. The infusion of capital arrived with such swiftness that industry insiders are now referring to it as the veritable gold rush moment for the burgeoning space economy. Thomas Tull, the chairman of the US Innovative Technology Fund, who spearheaded this significant investment, issued a statement that ought to send a shiver down the spine of every established aerospace corporation. He declared that launch capacity has unequivocally become the pivotal determinant of the United States' capacity to compete and maintain a leading position within the space economy. It is noteworthy that he did not cite scientific advancement or exploration as the primary driver. Instead, he emphasized competition and leadership. This lexicon clearly signals economic warfare, with space serving as the designated battlefield. Stoke Space is not merely in the business of constructing another rocket. They are meticulously crafting Nova, a wholly reusable launch vehicle. This remarkable craft features both stages that are designed to return to Earth, subsequently to be refueled and prepared for another launch within a matter of hours, not days or weeks. The implications of this capability are immense. While SpaceX is undeniably revolutionizing the space sector with its partially reusable Falcon 9 and its ambitious Starship program, Stoke is discreetly developing technology that could render even these pioneering advancements obsolete. The upper stage of their vehicle not only returns but does so with a heat shield ingeniously integrated with the engine nozzle. This represents an engineering feat that sounds almost implausible until one witnesses their compelling test footage. During the funding announcement, the company's chief executive officer Andy Lapser disclosed a critical detail that largely escaped the attention of most media outlets. He highlighted their substantial backlog of contracted commercial launch services. Corporations that have historically shown no prior interest in space activities are now proactively securing flights on a rocket that has yet to make its maiden voyage. Reports indicate that Amazon, Google, several prominent pharmaceutical firms, and at least 3 major financial institutions have all definitively secured launch slots. This raises a pertinent question. Why would financial institutions require access to rockets? Furthermore, what specific endeavors are pharmaceutical companies contemplating in orbit that compels them to commit hundreds of millions of dollars before the underlying technology has been fully proven? This is precisely where the narrative becomes exceptionally intriguing. Stoke's corporate headquarters, situated in Kent, Washington, is located mere minutes from Blue Origin's operational facilities. Their designated test site in Moses Lake is strategically positioned precisely between SpaceX's operational hub and Blue Origin's launch complex in West Texas. The company has actively recruited engineers from both of these prominent organizations. These are individuals who willingly departed from secure positions at the most significant entities in the space industry to join what was, until very recently, an obscure startup that commanded little public attention. These are not individuals who frequently change employers. They are seasoned industry veterans who perceive something at Stoke that compelled them to relinquish guaranteed career success. The technological innovations they are currently developing read like passages from science fiction. Their Zenith engine employs a full-flow stage combustion system, a highly efficient yet exceptionally intricate mechanism identical to the one utilized by SpaceX in their Raptor engine. To date, only 2 entities on Earth have successfully demonstrated proficiency with this technology, SpaceX and Stoke. However, Stoke's engine possesses a unique capability that the Raptor engine lacks. It is engineered to throttle down to a mere 5% of its maximum thrust. This is analogous to equipping a Formula One engine with the ability to maintain an idle speed in congested urban traffic. The level of control this affords for landing maneuvers and general vehicle navigation is simply unprecedented. Nevertheless, it is the upper stage of their vehicle that truly represents a revolutionary leap forward. By utilizing liquid hydrogen instead of methane or kerosene, they achieve a remarkable 30% increase in efficiency and an astounding 5-fold enhancement in cooling capacity. The engine nozzle itself functions as an actively cooled heat shield during the critical re-entry phase, thereby obviating the necessity for separate thermal protection systems. This design is both elegantly simple and, if proven effective, possesses the potential to fundamentally alter our perception of spacecraft design principles. Their prototype has already successfully endured multiple thermal cycle tests that meticulously replicate the extreme heat experienced during re-entry, a feat that took SpaceX considerable time and effort to achieve with their Starship program. The United States Space Force, demonstrating remarkable confidence, awarded Stoke a national security space launch contract in March of the year 2025, even before the rocket itself has been constructed. Allow that fact to truly resonate. The Department of Defense exhibits such profound faith in this technology that they are prepared to entrust critical national security missions to its execution. While the specific details of the contract remain classified, informed sources suggest it encompasses rapid response capabilities, specifically the ability to deploy military payloads with exceptionally short notice. We're discussing the potential for a transition from notification to orbital deployment in under 24 hours. The financial backing behind Stoke tells a compelling story in itself. Breakthrough Energy, Bill Gates' investment fund specifically focused on climate and energy solutions, does not typically allocate capital to space ventures. The same applies to Toyota Ventures and several of their other significant financial partners. These are organizations with a clear mandate to invest in transformative technologies that possess applications extending far beyond their immediate and obvious utility. What could a company specializing in space launches offer that would captivate researchers focused on climate change and automobile manufacturers? The answer to this perplexing question may well lie within Stoke's seldom discussed secondary capabilities. Their launch complex at Cape Canaveral is being established at the historically significant Launch Complex 14, the very site from which John Glenn embarked on his pioneering journey as the first American to orbit the Earth. However, the ongoing renovations include facilities that appear to be far in excess of what would be required for a conventional launch pad. These extensive underground repositories for cryogenic fuels are capable of supporting dozens of launches without the need for replenishment. The communication arrays being installed rival those found at military installations. Furthermore, blast-resistant bunkers are being constructed to specifications typically reserved for the deployment of missile silos. It is evident that they are not merely constructing a launch pad, they are building the foundational infrastructure for something significantly grander. The financial model that Stoke is pursuing fundamentally deviates from established norms within the launch industry. They are actively targeting a price point of less than $1 million per launch for small payloads, not on a per-kilogram basis. At such an accessible price point, deploying satellites into orbit will become more economical than erecting terrestrial cellular towers. This development has the potential to transform space from an exclusive domain, accessible only to governments and the ultra-wealthy, into a commonplace service that virtually anyone can utilize. Universities could readily launch their experimental payloads. Smaller nations could deploy their own communication satellites. Even private citizens might eventually have the capability to dispatch packages to the moon. Industry analysts have observed a peculiar characteristic in Stoke's recruitment strategies. Alongside aerospace engineers and specialists, they have been actively seeking out experts in fields that appear to be entirely unrelated to the direct execution of space launches. These include researchers in biotechnology, specialists in quantum computing, and seasoned professionals in the field of manufacturing under extreme environmental conditions. Job postings, though subsequently removed, were cached by employment websites and explicitly mentioned prior experience with off-world production systems and closed-loop life support mechanisms. These are not the typical requirements for a company focused solely on launch services. They strongly suggest the development of something far more complex. The timing of this substantial funding round is by no means coincidental. October of the year 2025 marks precisely 2 years since certain highly classified briefings were delivered to major investment funds regarding emergent opportunities within the space economy. These briefings, reportedly conducted by unspecified government agencies, outlined potential scenarios where access to space would become critically essential for economic survival within the ensuing decade, not merely for prosperity, but for fundamental survival. The smart money began its quiet reallocation of resources immediately. Investments were channeled into companies that possessed the capacity to provide rapid and dependable access to orbit. The involvement of breakthrough energy suggests an entirely different strategic dimension. Bill Gates has long been singularly focused on leveraging technological advancements to address the existential threat of climate change. However, what if the ultimate solution does not reside on Earth? Concepts such as solar power satellites, advanced atmospheric processing systems, and carbon capture technologies operating beyond the planet's atmosphere have existed for decades, but remained prohibitively expensive due to exorbitant launch costs. At Stokes' projected pricing, these ambitious projects suddenly become economically feasible. It is conceivable that the entire global energy economy could transition to space-based production within a single generation. Furthermore, there is the enigmatic Building 3 located at Stokes Kent facility. Employees require specialized clearance, exceeding their standard security credentials, to gain access to this particular structure. Deliveries to Building 3 are discreetly made under the cover of night, utilizing unmarked trucks with manifests that list only equipment designated for proprietary research. Public utility records indicate that the building's power consumption significantly surpasses that of the entire remainder of the facility combined. Whatever advanced technology is being developed within its confines necessitates an enormous and sustained energy input, the kind typically associated with particle accelerators or cutting-edge fusion research. The $990 million that Stoke has successfully raised represents far more than mere investment. It signifies a comprehensive mobilization. Sources within the company indicate that their objective extends beyond simply outmaneuvering SpaceX or Blue Origin in bringing their technology to market. They are engaged in a race against a defined deadline, a specific date by which their operational capabilities must be fully established. The palpable urgency surrounding this endeavor does not align with conventional business timelines. Instead, it strongly suggests the urgency of individuals who possess foreknowledge of an impending event, an event that will necessitate immediate and large-scale access to space. The fundamental question that looms is, for what are they so intensely preparing?